Chapter 851. He changed his expression and gently said to Wei Wei Bai, "Wife, does it sound good?" Wei Wei Bai, "Wife, aren't you ashamed of this title?" She couldn't help but look at the only audience, that third prince. As a result, Chi Chimu's eyes turned cold, and he reached out to pinch her chin. Then he smiled tenderly. "Didn't you say that this husband is too pedantic and doesn't know how to give you a bit of a surprise? I especially want to learn this song. I heard that it's what you girls like the most." Wei Wei Bai looked at him with disdain, very loyal to her character setting. "You play too badly. Where is the essence of the original song? There's no surprise. Listening to you play the song, it's more like being scared to death." Chi Chimu had been nursing a fire. What did she mean by always looking at the third prince? Was it because she took a fancy to other men's good looks, or because of their low-key but expensive clothes and decorations? Could it be that she knew that Luo Baiji was a member of the imperial family, so her heart was moved? He played the flute, but she disliked it. She was focused and happy looking at other men. He hadn't died yet, but she wanted to blossom first and then jump over the wall. The gentleness on Chi Chimu's face couldn't be maintained, and he fiercely threatened, "If it doesn't sound good, then throw away the extra sweet cakes I ordered to make. In any case, it's useless to feed them to a wooden person like you who doesn't understand music." Wei Wei Bai still broke a bit of her character setting for the sake of sweet cakes. This era was too boring. Besides eating, she didn't have any other pursuits. So she immediately tugged at his sleeve, acting cute with great familiarity. No, it's good, it's very good. Husband, any song you play sounds good." Chi Chimu heard her call him husband, and his breathing became somewhat unstable. He forced himself to hold on and coldly snorted. "That sweet cake is your husband. You only know how to eat. Don't you know that you're so heavy that you're going to break the bathtub from sitting on it?" Wei Wei Bai anxiously said, "What bathtub from sitting on it? It's clearly you who insisted on squeezing in, that's why it broke." Wei Wei Bai only reacted after hearing this. She quickly glanced at the audience next to her. Although the third prince still had a noble and indifferent expression on his face, the corners of his mouth could not help but curl up into a smile. She immediately got up and fiercely pushed Chi Chimu away. Lifting her skirt, she turned and ran, her face flushed red. When Chi Chimu saw her run away, his feet almost didn't follow his mind as his body chased after her. It was like a butterfly chasing after a fleeing flower. It was obvious that she was attracted to him. However, he only reacted after taking a few steps forward. The third prince? He glanced at the third prince who had just been attracted over. That familiar yet youthful face let him know that this was the best opportunity to get to know him. But thinking that Wei Wei Bai didn't know where to go, he wasn't in the mood to exchange pleasantries. He thought what he had just said to Wei Wei Bai. It was indeed inappropriate to discuss such a private matter in public. No matter how thick-skinned he was, he couldn't withstand such a dirty joke. Chi Chimu could only hurriedly nod to Luo Baiji and say, "Sorry for the disturbance." Then she directly gave up the opportunity to get to know the third prince and turned around to chase after that little bastard who only knew how to eat and was not the least bit worrisome. Chi Chimu ran away. Standing in place, Luo Baiji finally couldn't help but laugh. It was really too amusing. He really had never seen a married couple with such a cute and likable way of interacting. They were clearly bickering like a pair of clowns, but it made people feel that this was what it meant to be in love. The shadow guard next to him was gratified. It had been a long time since he saw the third prince laugh. In the future, it would be good to let that couple get closer. Unknowingly, Chi Chimu's goal of obtaining the third prince's favorable impression was accomplished in a very strange way. Chapter 852. Chi Chimu had run halfway when he caught Wei Wei Bai. Their first perfect meeting with the third prince had been ruined. What made him even more irritable was, had she taken a fancy to the third prince? So Chi Chimu dragged Wei Wei Bai back for a joint hearing. He pushed her onto the bed. Then he blocked the bedside and smiled coldly. "What? Just now you saw a man, and you were so shy that you ran away." Wei Wei Bai was at a loss, belatedly understanding what he was saying. She immediately exploded. "Chi Chimu, am I that kind of shameless woman?" Chi Chimu thought of his past life. in the palace. He seemed to have heard that Madame Bai wanted to send Wei Wei Bai into the palace to be the third prince's concubine. When he thought of that, his eyes turned red. If she hadn't died, she was the third prince's woman in his past life. So when they met in this life, this woman's eyes were fixed on him. He smiled coldly, most of his face shadowed, very sinister. I don't know if you're shameless or not, but if you dare to set your eyes on another man and have an affair with me, I will kill you. The last 3 words were as cold as the language of hell. It made one's scalp numb. Saying this, Chi Chimu didn't care that it was daytime and had already pounced. He was already very familiar with how to subdue her. Coldly and swiftly, he bound her restless hands and pressed down on her struggling legs, imprisoning her under him. She couldn't go anywhere, and running away was useless. He could catch her at any time. Wei Wei Bai's face was filled with fear. Chi Chimu, get lost for me. He scared her. Chi Chimu pinched her face and sneered. What? You're very happy looking at other men, but when I'm not by your side, you're going to pounce over. In his past life, she might have been the third prince's concubine. It made him gnash his teeth at the thought. She didn't know if her previous life would affect this life. Could it be that she fell in love at first sight? Wei Wei Bai finally couldn't take it anymore. She burst into tears and said angrily, It's none of your business, even if I throw myself at him. Don't you hate me? The more fickle I am, the more annoying I am. Wouldn't you be the happiest? Why are you angry? Chi Chimu was enraged. You really want to climb the wall to find a man for me? Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth and glared at him. What's wrong with finding a man? Are you jealous? These words were like a clap of thunder that struck Chi Chimu. His fingers trembled, and he almost couldn't hold down the lively Wei Wei Bai. Jealousy. He was not stupid. In fact, he was very intelligent. During this period of time with Wei Wei Bai, the thoughts of tormenting her in his heart turned into eager tenderness. When he was in bed, he began to worry about whether he would hurt her. He even carefully helped her clean her body. He couldn't bear to let her do any of the servants' work. He knew that her temperament was delicate and she had never done this before. He would rather do it himself, and there wasn't a trace of unwillingness in his heart. He was aware of all these signs, but he didn't dare to think too deeply. However, her words completely shattered his ostrich mentality. Jealousy, he was indeed jealous. The kind of unbearable sourness and fear of loss intertwined together. It could simply drive a person crazy. Chi Chimu couldn't help but tighten his grip on her bound hands. He said word by word, Who's jealous? I won't be jealous, but you are disgracing my reputation by finding another man. I will make you regret being born into this world. Such vicious words. Even in his previous life, when he was eradicating dissidents, he had never said these words. Chapter 853. But he used it to threaten Wei Wei Bai, who only knew how to make a small fuss. Although her heart was bad, she could never be bad to the right place. Chi Chimu was afraid that he would regret it. He wouldn't like her. He couldn't like her at all. Even if he was crazy, he couldn't like her. The Bai family was what he wanted to eradicate, and she was also one of the murderers who had killed him in his previous life. After eradicating the Bai family, he kept her by his side. It was just to see her in so much pain that she wished she was dead, suffering day and night under the body of her enemy, powerless to struggle. This was his revenge plan. Wei Wei Bai heard his words and froze, her face pale. She gritted her teeth and said, Reputation, reputation, you just care about your damn reputation. Get off my body. Chi Chimu wordlessly began to tear off her clothes. Wei Wei Bai was like a stubborn donkey, struggling with all her might. Chi Chimu, if you like reputation so much, then sleep with your reputation. Why did you come looking for me? Chi Chimu buried his head and worked hard. Get off, get off. Don't you feel uncomfortable with a woman you don't like? Not uncomfortable. Chi Chimu's entire body trembled, and there was even some fear in his eyes, hidden in his dark expression. He softly repeated, How can I be jealous? I can't. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 70. After this incident, Wei Wei Bai began a Cold War. This Cold War lasted for several days, mocking and ridiculing Chi Chimu every day, in addition to disdain. Chi Chimu didn't know if he felt guilty or not. He actually didn't dare to be too forceful. Their situation of strength seemed to have been reversed. After the system finished kneading the instant noodles, it remembered that it had a host. "What's wrong? Why are you still hating me?" Wei Wei Bai leisurely trimmed her nails. "Am I not teaching Chi Chimu how to rest and recuperate as a husband of the 3 obediences and 4 virtues? I don't show my might, don't protest, so how can he understand how difficult it is for my lively and jumping sweetness? Men, once cold, understand love." The system was silent. Lively and jumping sweetness. Wasn't that a hypocrite who stirred up trouble? The host would always have a perfect misconception of his own position. When Chi Chimu went out, he deliberately ran into the third prince and successfully played a game of chess with him. The third prince was unexpectedly easy to get along with. He seemed to have a good impression of him. But halfway through the game, the third prince casually asked about Wei Wei Bai. His heart immediately turned cold, and he immediately became vigilant. Why did he ask? Did he fall for Wei Wei Bai? When Chi Chimu thought of that, even a plan to beat up the third prince appeared in his mind. Fortunately, the third prince was only envious of their deep love. She also said that 2 people who were so deeply in love must be kind and pure, trustworthy people. Bai, vicious, selfish. Wei Wei, Chimu, scheming, dark and twisted, kind and pure. Was the third prince's eyes clouded by something? How could he tell? Even someone as good at enduring as Chi Chimu couldn't help but twitch his lips when he heard this description, almost revealing his true face. The emperor that he had assisted in his previous life. To see someone so perfectly miss all the correct answers. Fine, the emperor that he chose, he had to kneel and hug his thigh to death. Perhaps because he heard Wei Wei Bai, his mind was distracted while brushing up the third prince's good impression. She had ignored him for 5 days. In the past, she would at least order him around, scold him, disdain him, and even use her delicate little hands to hit him. Chapter 854. She wanted him to clean the house, make him go get more plum cakes, and warm her bed for her to sleep. Thinking about it like this, was he a masochist? He actually hated that she couldn't be like this. It was better than ignoring him. She even gave him a sidelong glance. Perhaps she saw that he was absent-minded. The third prince asked, "Do you have some urgent matter?" Chi Chima's mouth was quick. "No, I just want to..." He stopped in time. The third prince was very understanding. "I understand. Newlyweds should go back and accompany your wife." Chi Chimu wanted to explain, but seeing the other's clear eyes, as if seeing through everything, he could only take back his lies. Then he gave up the opportunity to get closer to the third prince. And he came back again. He was still carrying some plum cakes in his hand. The reminder of Chi Chimu's return had just sounded. Wei Wei Bai was very natural and smooth. She quickly and skillfully propped up her face with both hands, a trace of melancholy on her face. Her eyes were faint and sad as she looked out the half-open window at the blooming plum blossoms. Angle, posture, expression. There was absolutely no dead angle. Chi Chimu stepped through the door and looked up to see Wei Wei Bai sitting at the table, her side facing him. Her figure was petite and thin, her slender, snow-white fingers propping up her face. There was no delicate and indifferent expression on her face. Instead, there was some cute baby fat propped up by her hands. But this couldn't compare to the fragile and helpless sadness on her face. One was the arrogant, brainless, and selfish Wei Wei Bai who didn't care about others. Also had such a sorrowful and weak expression. She had always been a little hedgehog, uncomfortable and prickly. She seemed to have just noticed him and dazedly turned back to look at him. The corners of her eyes were red, and tears could be seen faintly in her eyes. That kind of silent grievance overflowed. Chi Chimu couldn't speak for a moment and could only stand foolishly, the cake in his hand shaking a few times. When Wei Wei Bai saw him, she immediately rubbed her eyes. Then she snorted and shifted her sitting position, turning her back to him. Chi Chimu pursed his lips, a wave of anger stifling in his heart. He hesitated for a moment, then slowly moved to stand behind her. "Do you want some cake?" Bai Weiwei didn't say anything. Chi Chimu stared at her back for a moment before suppressing his voice, doing his best to be gentle. "It was just made. I also asked them to put more honey in it." Wei Wei Bai was indifferent. She didn't even give him a cold snort. Such a cold war between Wei Wei Bai. He was at a loss for what to do, and even his entire body felt uncomfortable. He would rather she scold him. At least when she was scolding him, her eyes were very beautiful. Her gaze was so bright that it seemed like there was light in them, and those eyes were filled with a shadow. Chi Chimu couldn't help but move, wanting to see her. However, Wei Wei Bai discovered his intentions and changed her position, continuing to face him with her back. She was clearly not looking at him. This was the first time Chi Chimu had been so thoroughly ignored by someone. His fingers clenched so tightly that the rope was about to cut into his flesh, but he didn't feel any pain. He placed the cake on the table and opened the wrapper, revealing the beautiful plum blossom cake inside. Wei Wei Bai glanced sideways. Chi Chimu's eyes brightened. In the end, she only glanced and didn't look much before turning her head away again. She didn't even say a word of disdain. Chi Chimu's eyes were gloomy. After enduring for so many days, he finally exploded. He grabbed Wei Wei Bai, forcing her to turn back. Wei Wei Bai was pulled by him, and her entire body fell back, straight into his arms. Chapter 855. The man's embrace was warm and carried a faintly discernible cold fragrance. That fragrance was actually stained with the orchid fragrance of her body. However, this pleasant smell was unable to cover up his violent and brutal actions. Chi Chimu reached out and clasped her chin, turning her face back to look at her pair of black, bright eyes filled with fear. He looked at her coldly and sneered. "What? You really dare to ignore me? Have I been too good to you, making you forget your identity?" His hand gripped her frail, slender arm with some force. His entire person was filled with a terrifying killing intent. Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes trembled, and she finally spoke. "Chi Chimu, who do you think I am to you? Your toy, or the target of your revenge? If you're so hateful, you might as well push me into ice water and drown me. In any case, it's not your first time. Why restrain me like this, mutually tormenting each other?" After she finished speaking, her tears failed to live up to her expectations and fell. This cry was silent, extremely aggrieved and pitiful. It made one's heart throb with pain. Chi Chimu used to be happy and excited when he saw her cry, but now his mood was very bad. He couldn't maintain the gloomy expression on his face as he sensed the fragmented, weak sourness in his heart. His hand, gripping her chin, shook uncontrollably. He wanted to fret and stop her from crying, but his fingertips couldn't help but rub against her delicate face. She cried pitifully, her face somewhat pale. His fingers pressed against her warm cheeks, as if wanting to give her a bit more color. Wei Wei Bai with flushed cheeks was so beautiful. Almost without thinking, he lowered his head and kissed her. This kiss was out of control. With a burning and strong possessiveness, he recklessly plundered the sweetness of her lips. Wei Wei Bai was held by him and could only weakly raise her neck, allowing him to take what he wanted. Chi Chimu said that her physical strength was poor, but it wasn't the kind of poor women. It was very easy to control a delicate Wei Wei Bai. So Wei Wei Bai could only lean against his chest, her cheeks dizzy from his kisses, her eyes soft and unable to struggle. She glared at him angrily. Chi Chimu's breathing was chaotic, the gloomy and indifference in his eyes replaced by an even more intense heat. He lowered his head awkwardly, released Wei Wei Bai, and took 2 steps back. Then, as if he wanted to hide something, he picked up a sweet cake and gently brought it to her lips. "Eat some. It was still warm just now." The desserts were already cold, but his fingers were unbearably hot. Wei Wei Bai's face was cold and pale, just like the elegant and delicate plum blossoms outside the window. Her eyes were full of angry condemnation. Then, she reached out and slapped the sweet cake out of his hand. She stood up and met Chi Chimu's complicated gaze. Gritting her teeth, she angrily said, "I hate you. Hate your self-righteousness and pettiness. Hate your unreasonable and perverted coercion. Hate even more when you bully me. I want to divorce you." As soon as he said this, Chi Chimu didn't say anything, only looking at her solemnly. She was clearly scolding him, but his heart was beating like a drum, this violent heartbeat. He could barely control his emotions. He suppressed his surging emotions and revealed a smile. Divorce me? Unfortunately, the law states that only men can divorce women. I won't let go. When you die, you can only die in my family's graveyard. Wei Wei Bai was stunned, her eyes reddening. Chi Chimu turned his face away, clenching his fists. He suddenly turned and walked out with quick steps. When he was far away, he couldn't see the woman anymore. Chi Chimu punched the temple wall, his eyes burning red, his baleful aura frightening. He gasped for breath, the beating in his chest unable to calm down. It beat against his chest again and again. His heart wasn't at peace at all. Just like Wei Wei Bai, she wasn't easy to worry about. Chi Chimu pressed against his chest and leaned against the wall, standing dazedly for a long time. Snowflakes fell, floating above his head. He seemed to have just woken up, laughing at himself. He really couldn't deceive himself. How could he like such a heartless little fool? Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 75. Chapter 856. After Chi Chimu left, Wei Wei Bai sat down in a chair, exhausted. Her eyes were still red as she began to gnaw on a sweet cake. It was rare to eat a food she liked in a plane. She didn't know the next meal. AI, this cake was made too authentically. The system watched from beginning to end, thinking that there was some small side task to torment people. In the end, when it looked up, there was nothing above its head. It asked, "Is it okay to anger the male lead and make him run away?" For its disappointing host, its heart had been broken. Even halfway through the book of 1,000 moves against the host, its heart softened. It felt that after interacting with each other for so many planes, there would always be some feelings. So as a decathlon super good system, it should be a bit gentler. Wei Wei Bai, if I don't do this, the favorability will be stuck and won't go up. Chi Chimu is a man with a strong sense of inferiority. His goal in life is to take revenge and let himself live in incomparable glory. Speaking to this point, she couldn't help but sit up straight, giving this useless system a bit of science. This kind of man, you have to give him a blow when his feelings are about the same. Let him know that his actions will hurt me. Such an indifferent protest could make the other party begin to face their hatred, discover the true feelings in their hearts. Wei Wei Bai sighed. So now give him the cold shoulder until he can't stand it, and he will naturally let go of his vengeful mentality. The system was silent for a moment before finally sighing faintly. Wei Wei Bai's scalp tingled from its sigh. Question mark. The system spoke earnestly. You can be considered to have gone through hundreds of battles and have more experience. Before, you couldn't even kiss, but now you can take the initiative to roll in the sheets. I'm deeply gratified. Wei Wei Bai, why does this praise sound so awkward? When Chi Chimu returned, he had already returned to normal. He was indifferent and gentle, looking like a hypocrite. Wei Wei Bai ignored him. When it was time to sleep at night, Chi Chimu warmed the quilt with a water bottle and said, "You sleep, I'm going to read a book." Wei Wei Bai didn't say anything and went straight to bed. She nestled in a warm spot and closed her eyes to take a nap. After Chi Chimu had been fidgeting for a good while, when he came over, he found that she had fallen asleep. He stood by the bed for a long time before he took off his clothes and went to bed. In the dim yellow candlelight, he looked at her curled-up body with her back to him. Finally, he couldn't help but reach out and carefully pull her into his embrace, until her entire body fit perfectly into his chest. He heaved a sigh of relief, but his heart was still beating rapidly. He buried his face in her hair and smelled like orchids. This fragrance was completely devoid of any shadow. There was only tenderness and even peace of mind. He hugged her, inhaled her fragrance, and fell asleep peacefully. The next day, he woke up early and got out of bed before she did. Afterwards, Chi Chimu went to the kitchen and spent some extra silver to prepare some of Wei Wei Bai's favorite vegetarian dishes. There was also the plum blossom cake that she always ordered every day. When he brought it back, she was sitting on the bed. Her long hair was messy, and her eyes were still sleepy. So cute that it made one's heart soften. Chi Chimu felt that he was sick. How did he discover his feelings? Looking at her again, he felt that everything about her was good. He pursed his lips and said indifferently, Get up and tidy up. Let's eat. Wei Wei Bai rolled her eyes at him, not knowing how delicate and lovely her small appearance was. Chi Chimu's eyes darkened, but he didn't impulsively rush over to push her down. He looked at the dishes on the table with forbearance. Chapter 857. It was all her favorite food. She should know his intention to soften. As a result, Wei Wei Bai finished eating without any expression, as though she couldn't tell that he had specially ordered these dishes to be prepared. For the first time, Chi Chimu, who had never allowed to suffer a loss, endured and didn't let her know. This was what he did for her. It was as though saying it would put him at a disadvantage. He sullenly watched her heartlessly finish eating and didn't move his chopsticks much. After waiting for a long time, Wei Wei Bai left on her own. Chi Chimu sat at the table, his entire body gloomy. He threw his chopsticks on the table, wanting to slap the table and threaten her to pay attention to him. But when he looked up, he saw Wei Wei Bai running to the charcoal stove and stirring the flames to warm herself. The warm light of the fire shone on her white, jade-like face. Her eyelashes were like butterflies, and her eyes were clear and clean. Her entire person was truly warm and lovable. If he didn't know her nature, with her appearance, who knew how many men would be charmed away? Chi Chimu endured, but in the end, he couldn't bear to continue using insidious methods to control her obedience. He still didn't know her nature, but he was still bewitched by her. Chi Chimu's feelings for Wei Wei Bai were too complicated, so he could only avoid continuing to win the third prince's trust. The third prince was also happy to find a friend to pass the time within the quiet and boring Great Imperial Temple. Chi Chimu knew the third prince's thoughts and used the method of chess friends to slowly introduce the topic of politics. As expected, the third prince looked at him differently. The two people got along harmoniously. Chi Chimu had worked for him in his past life and naturally knew how to cater to his interests. But looking at the third prince's increasingly trusting gaze, the heartless person in his room treated him coldly day after day. He would occasionally reveal a complicated expression. The third prince asked, "What? Does Chima have some difficulties?" Chi Chimu hesitated for a moment before saying indifferently, "No." The third prince was like a woman inquiring about gossip, asking with some interest, "Is the one at home angry with you?" During this time, he had been close to Chi Chimu and naturally knew about Wei Wei Bai's Cold War. A trace of embarrassment flashed across Chi Chimu's calm face. His lips moved before he resigned himself to his fate. A woman's mind is truly hard to guess. He believed that during this period of time, he had rushed to curry favor with her, and everyone could see it. However, she took his concession as a matter of course and didn't feel the slightest bit of closeness to him. However, the third prince was very mature and said, "It's you who don't know how to please. Women need to be coaxed. With your cold face every day, even I am about to be scared away, let alone a little girl." Because the third prince was 2 years older than Chi Chimu. Therefore, when he addressed Wei Wei Bai, the third prince would call her little sister. It was also a tacit agreement that Chi Chimu had already obtained a place in his heart and obtained his trust. Chi Chimu said somewhat awkwardly, "Coax?" He had already fetched water for her to wash her feet. Was that not enough to coax her? After coldly washing her feet, she went to sleep on the bed that he had warmed up in advance. Then, she continued to ignore him with her back facing him. Several times, Chi Chimu almost couldn't suppress the dark distortion in his heart and forced himself on her. But this impulse was bitterly suppressed. He wasn't a fool. Previously, obtaining Wei Wei Bai had already made her particularly loathe him. If he wanted to change the way the two of them interacted, he couldn't continue to force it. The third prince shook his head. This coaxing needs to rely on a mouth that knows how to sweet talk in honeyed words, rely on shameless pestering, and more importantly, wholeheartedly devoted actions. Chapter 858. This summary was rather interesting, but when he thought of the third prince's previous life, the harem was a mess of intrigue. Chi Chimu also felt that this guy's words weren't too reliable. He hesitated, blindly obeying her, where's the least bit of a man's backbone. The third prince hated iron for not becoming steel. Do you want a tender and sweet little wife, or do you want her man's backbone? These words made Chi Chimu silent. Wei Wei Bai had nothing to do for several days. Counting the time, she knew that the Cold War was about to end. After all, the Cold War was to force Chi Chimu to see his heart clearly. It was fine as long as the goal was achieved. Don't push it too far so as to avoid dropping favorability. Wei Wei Bai was just thinking about what reason to use to end this situation of ignoring her. The door was pushed open, and the delicate fragrance of plum blossoms wafted over. Chi Chimu slowly walked in, holding a large bouquet of plum blossom branches. Wei Wei Bai turned to look at him, her eyes puzzled. Chi Chimu thought of the third prince's flowers. It was said that before husband and wife, they should occasionally have some fun. Sending a few flowers, a few gifts, or a few sweet words would have a good effect. He originally didn't want to do so, but when he passed by the plum blossom forest and saw the brilliant flowers, he stood dazed for a long time and couldn't help but break off some good-looking branches. But when he really came before her, Chi Chimu, holding the flowers, suddenly fell silent. Wei Wei Bai looked at the flowers in his hands and understood. He was going to send flowers, After sending flowers, he would reluctantly show a shy expression and then soften his attitude at night. It would definitely increase the favorability. Wei Wei Bai was already about to reach out to receive the flowers. Chi Chimu lowered his head and walked over, then walked directly to the vase. The vase that hadn't had flowers for several days was replaced with a large bouquet of plum blossoms. Wei Wei Bai quickly retracted her fingers and clenched them into a fist, almost reaching out to take the flowers. Chi Chimu arranged the flowers, his back to Wei Wei Bai. His indifferent, handsome face was dyed with traces of red. He didn't expect that a simple act of sending flowers would be so difficult, even afraid of rejection. Chi Chimu heard his own heartbeat, throbbing violently. He suppressed this restlessness, regained his calm expression, and turned to look at her. However, he found that Wei Wei Bai was peeking at him, although she quickly looked away. But Chi Chimu's mind was still moved. He suddenly walked over and held her wrist. In his palm, her slender wrist was so fragile and easily restrained. Chi Chimu couldn't help but pinch her before saying, "Come with me." Wei Wei Bai frowned. She wanted to say something, but she remembered her Cold War with him. She just rolled her eyes at him and refused to move. Chi Chimu was in a deadlock with her, but her delicate ears were somewhat red. His heart skipped a few beats, and his tone suddenly became heavy. "If you're not leaving, then let's go to bed." When Wei Wei Bai heard this, she turned around and glared at him fiercely. Her beautiful eyes were full of annoyance. Chi Chimu pursed his lips before saying, "Are you going or not?" Wei Wei Bai frowned and hesitated for a moment before she reluctantly got up and followed him out. Chi Chimu led her along, walking slowly. The great imperial temple was surrounded by plum trees. The petals of the plum blossoms scattered down, carrying a hint of romance. They walked to the east side of the great imperial temple, where there were the most plum trees. On the snowy ground, the red plum blossoms were in full bloom, more gorgeous and beautiful than flames. Wei Wei Bai stared blankly for a moment. Chi Chimu looked at her and found that she liked it, so he breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't know what was wrong with him. He, who had always been clear-headed, clearly knew that his feelings for her were wrong. Chapter 859. Wei Wei Bai swore that this was the plane where she spent the most substitute stickers. She didn't even dare to calculate whether the pitiful 30 life points from completing the mission could offset those substitute stickers. She was so haggard. The system also swore that this was the first time it had seen a plane with so many bullet screens. From time to time, there would be a damned army bombardment, a bombardment of core socialist values. It felt that it was already a qualified member of the egg team. It was so haggard. Chi Chimu's spirit had been very good recently. No matter what, Wei Wei Bai would start throwing things at him again, scold him, and occasionally hit him with her pink fists. Moreover, she would resume those unspeakable, laugh-inducing activities on the bed. Chi Chimu felt that his life was especially bright. Right, he had also won the third prince's trust. He had almost forgotten this matter. After staying in the great imperial temple for several months, Chi Chimu treated Wei Wei Bai differently. He couldn't bear to use any of those humiliating methods on her. Instead, he repeatedly made concessions to protect her. Everything that she ate or used had to go through his hands. Not a single trace of his previous ruthless and gloomy appearance could be seen. But Bai Weiwei was still as heartless as before, making things difficult for Qi Chimu at every turn. She also wanted to happily use sweet tricks on Qi Chimu, letting the favorability climb up. After all, sweet strategies were easy and enjoyable. Who liked to torture themselves, pondering every day how to scheme against their target. However, the Imperial Examination's stumbling block forced her to go against Qi Chimu. After leaving the temple, Qi Chimu, after several months of studying and preparing, was about to enter the examination hall again. Weiwei Bai's small Imperial Examination mission also reminded her. Stop Qi Chimu from entering the examination hall. The time limit was 3 days. Weiwei Bai looked at the 90 favorability she had obtained by selling her body and couldn't help but say, is there a hole in your main system's head? Would it die from giving a sweet strategy? Must it torment me to death before it's happy? The system said, there are sweet strategies, such as those where the male lead and the host are already in love, and then the male lead will follow the reincarnation cycle with his memories. He will fall in love with the host at first sight every day, and the second sight strategy mission is completed. Weiwei Bai, what? There were no insane side quests, no unreliable idiotic system that dragged him down, and no unreasonable time limit for clearing the game. You've completed the mission after meeting him twice? The system said, no, I'm just in charge of the sweet strategy. I just need to show off my love. Weiwei Bai, then why don't I have a mission to show off my love? The system was a little embarrassed. That's because you're a torturing guide. The sweet strategy route was easy to enjoy, so it was very difficult to snatch it. Generally, only an outstanding system with ability and background could snatch this kind of mission for its host. The oppressive route is all those incompetent people at the bottom of society. Weiwei Bai was silent for a moment before she said, I understand. To put it bluntly, her system was at the bottom of society. It was poor, incapable, and had no backdoor. All it could do was snatch some unpresentable and undesirable missions for its host. Suddenly, an image appeared in her mind. In the bleak cold wind, a tattered and desolate system wrapped in newspapers, rummaging through the trash for some leftovers. It was poor and haggard. It was obviously tired to death, but for its host who had neither food nor water, it could only keep rummaging through the trash. It only hoped to give its host some edible food so that she would not starve to death. Chapter 860. You can search Transmigration System. Prince Charming, come to search book www.sashu.com in Baidu to find the. Thinking of that scene, even the stone-hearted Weiwei Bai couldn't help but feel her nose turn sour. Forget it. Her family system didn't have the ability. What could she do? After all, society was cruel. Perhaps her family system's family background wasn't good, which was why it had become a social loser. Of course, it couldn't get good resources. Weiwei Bai showed a rare gentleness. It's fine. No matter how poor or bitter, we'll walk together. One day, you'll shake off this poor hat and have a beautiful future. The system's face was a mess. It felt that the host had misunderstood something and hurriedly explained, actually, there's a reason why I didn't grab the sweet route. It's not because I'm poor and useless. Weiwei Bai, I understand. Poor people also needed dignity. She understood. System, what does the host understand? Why doesn't it understand? Qi Chimu put the Imperial Examination case in the room. He didn't specifically guard against Weiwei Bai. He saw her sitting at the table embroidering with a twisted expression. After returning from the temple, she had been called by Madame Bai to recite a pile of words, including how to win over a husband's heart and how female workers also needed to practice well. That was why it was rare to see her so quietly doing these things. Qi Chimu naturally understood that it was because that poisonous woman, Madame Bai, knew that his value had increased. So she planned to use Weiwei Bai to win him over. In the future, if he really succeeded in the Imperial Examination, he would be a target for Madame Bai to squeeze. He thought of that old woman, and his lips curled into a cold smile. When the court examination was over, he would find an opportunity to take away Wei Wei Bai and then kill the entire Bai family. When the time came, he would burn the corpses, and who would be able to find out that it was murder? At that time, Wei Wei Bai could only rely on him. How good would that be? Chi Chimu put down the book. He had memorized the questions for tomorrow's examination. After his rebirth, the imperial examination was much simpler for him. He looked up at her and found that she was already yawning in boredom, but she was still earnestly embroidering flowers. She wore a simple and elegant light blue dress today, her hair casually tied up with a simple and beautiful hairpin. It was simple and clean, like a pear blossom reflected in water. Chi Chimu stared at her in a daze for a good while, a quiet sweetness fermenting in his heart. When he had seen enough, he shifted his gaze away and saw the hairpin on her head. It was the key and map to his family's treasury. He didn't need the map, but the key. For the time being, he didn't need it. Under the deliberate planning in advance, his relationship with the third prince was so good that he didn't need money to surrender. When the money was needed in the future, it would be when the third prince rebelled. He calmly brewed a cup of honey flower tea and took the mung bean cake. Then he walked to her side, put down the mung bean cake, and gave her the flower tea. Drink some, it's good for your body. And then take the embroidery bandage from her hand. There were several flower sketches on the table. It was the homework that Madame Bai had given her. Chi Chimu held a needle and thread, calmly and indifferently beginning to help her embroider. Her embroidery skills were much better than hers. Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows and was about to start taunting. Chi Chimu directly stuffed a piece of mung bean cake in her mouth. Be good. I'll help you embroider it soon. Wei Wei Bai immediately said vaguely, My embroidery is different from yours. My mother will know. Chi Chimu said indifferently, It's better if it's different. How could the servants outside not be clear about the matters in this room? Many of them were Madame Bai's eyes and ears. If he helped Wei Wei Bai, Madame Bai would only feel more at ease. Wei Wei Bai looked at his embroidery. It wasn't feminine at all, but his movements were very beautiful. She couldn't help but frown. How do you know everything? / Chapter 861. Chi Chimu looked up at her. His face was indifferent, but his eyes carried traces of gentleness. Maybe it's because I will meet a wife who doesn't know anything, so life made me learn everything in advance so that I can welcome her. He thought of his difficult past and didn't feel much anger. At least those experiences had allowed him to learn many things, and these things made her look at him brighter. Thinking about it this way, those lives weren't so worthless. Wei Wei Bai was stunned before she realized who the wife he was talking about was. She pursed her lips as though she wanted to sneer, but her lips moved, and she finally turned her head away. Humph! Chi Chimu looked up at her and found that her ears were a little red. Warm light entered the window. The two of them sat together, their shadows intertwining. They appeared affectionate and gentle. Chi Chimu's fingers nimbly embroidered flowers, his mood unusually calm and beautiful. You want to continue like this, always. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 92. The imperial examinations were the next day, so it was rare that they didn't toss around much at night. Wei Wei Bai was halfway asleep when the system woke her up. She rubbed her eyes and carefully crawled over Chi Chimu's body, getting out of bed. Chi Chimu opened his eyes and saw her casually draped in a soft and thin robe, walking barefoot across the cold floor. Then she walked to the table and bent down to light the lamp. She turned her face to him, her eyelashes lightly entwined, seeming somewhat nervous. Her complexion was somewhat pale and delicate under the light, and her pair of black eyes were illuminated by the light with an amber hue. She opened his box for the imperial examinations and put some papers inside. Would it be like last time, giving him a cheat sheet for the imperial examinations? Chi Chimu's heart was actually somewhat stuffy. She still hadn't fallen for him, so she didn't feel the slightest bit of heartache over whether or not he could pass the imperial examinations. But to make him hate her, he couldn't do it. Wei Wei Bai breathed a sigh of relief, then turned and gently crawled over his body, smoothly returning to the warm bed. She glanced at him and found that he was still asleep. Wei Wei Bai yawned silently and continued to close her eyes, slowly falling asleep. Chi Chimu opened his eyes again. He reached out and gently pinched her face. Little rascal. However, there was a hint of gentleness in his voice, and there wasn't the slightest bit of scolding. He very carefully hugged her feet in his arms, and sure enough, they were extremely cold. He placed her feet on his warm abdomen to warm her feet. Wei Wei Bai moaned comfortably in her sleep. Chi Chimu's eyes carried traces of indulgence, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl into a smile. The next day, Wei Wei Bai woke up and found that Chi Chimu had gotten up early and left. The entrance for the imperial examinations was especially early. Before the sun rose, the students had to wait. Wei Wei Bai didn't think too much about it. The system said, "It doesn't look like a cheat sheet." Wei Wei Bai said, "It's not like I can pass the test even if I use my cheat sheet." She had already asked the system, and the same blocking method would not work. Wei Wei Bai lazily got up. "All right, Chi Chima has left. I should also elope." Yes, what she put in was a green hat love letter, as well as a beautiful praise for her elopement partner. On the paper she had given Chi Chima last night, she had written that she had fallen in love with a certain man at first sight, praising him for a full 3,000 words. Then at the end of the letter, she had casually scribbled a line of small words. She had decided to elope with a certain man, and then asked for a letter of divorce. Chapter 862. Wei Wei Bai said to the system, "This method of obstruction is fierce enough. I gave him a green hat, and he can't take the exam if he's anxious. Isn't that vicious? System, too ruthless." When Chi Chimu saw this elopement love letter, he couldn't help but be angered to death. "Wei Wei Bai, I've already found a friend to help me stage this elopement drama. I'll be able to come back when the mission notification is complete." Once she carried out the elopement mission, she would really create an elopement plot. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to fool the main system. The system was deeply silent, expressing infinite towards its host's death-seeking behavior. She still wanted to come back. Wasn't she afraid of being eaten alive by Chi Chimu? Chi Chimu spread out the draft paper. Seeing that the questions hadn't changed, he very calmly began to write the answers. The examinees beside him didn't have good expressions. The imperial examination questions were very difficult, much more difficult than the previous few times. So among the wailing examinees, Chi Chimu could be considered the calmest. He suddenly thought of the few pages of paper that Wei Wei Bai had stuffed into his hands. He swept a glance and found that they were love letters. "The man I like is incomparably handsome, has excellent family knowledge, noble character, gentle and considerate, likes me to death." Because he was in a hurry to enter the examination hall, he only hurriedly swept a glance in front of him. He was already blushing from such a straightforward confession. This was a very rare experience for Chi Chimu. Noble character, of course, he was definitely one. Incomparably handsome, he had never seen anyone better looking than him. Other than Wei Wei Bai, there was no other woman. Gentle and considerate, he poured out his heart and lungs for her, so he was definitely gentle and considerate. Liked her to death. What did it matter if she wanted to die? Anything was fine. It turned out that what she had stuffed into his hands in the middle of the night was actually a love letter. So he directly entered the examination hall with the love letter. Those who were searching his body also examined it, then looked at him with an indescribable expression. One of the soldiers who was searching his body said, "Carrying this, is it to give yourself the motivation to pass the exam?" Divorced, his wife wearing a green hat. If he didn't pass the exam, wouldn't he vomit blood and die? Chi Chima nodded. "N, is this contraband?" Her love letter must have been his motivation. Just a glance at it made him so excited that he could write his best essay. Another first place was guaranteed. The soldier looked at him sympathetically. "It doesn't count. Take it." Then Chi Chimu excitedly entered the examination hall with the love letter. This was the first love letter that Wei Wei Bai had given him. It was the best gift he had ever received in his life. Therefore, good things had to be looked at slowly. He couldn't bear to look at them all in one go. Chi Chimu treated this love letter as his prize. Anyway, After finishing a big question, she would read 2 lines of love letters. He's as handsome as a tree in the wind, like a pine plum tree in the snow, making people unable to forget him at first glance. She was cold to him, but she had a hot temper. He didn't expect that even his inner confession would be so intense and unrestrained. Like this, Chichimu's spirits were exceptionally good as he more or less finished writing all the imperial examination questions. After reading the love letter, there was only the last piece of paper and the last few lines left. He had just finished writing his question. The question was related to national affairs. He had long prepared a draft in his heart. Just as he was about to put pen to paper, he suddenly saw that the last few lines were like this. I like him. His family is rich, raising his gentle and without the taste of poverty. His family is rich. He felt that something was wrong. He continued to read. I like him. His name is Ping Linqing. I can no longer extricate myself from him. The smile hanging at the corner of Chichimu's mouth stiffened. So Chichimu, let's separate. Forcefully twisting a melon is not sweet. I won't twist it for you. Let's never see each other again. Chichimu. He was silent for a long time before he suddenly laughed coldly, his laughter incomparably sinister. Then he put pen to paper, the tip of the pen sharp and awe-inspiring, full of murderous intent. The answer was originally aggressive and progressive, so this writing style was simply a perfect match. Chichimu finished writing the answer. When the time came, the door opened and the examiner collected the paper. He unhurriedly got up and even calmly tidied up the box, placing the green hat love letter on his chest. When he walked out and returned home, he pushed open the door. The room was empty. He very calmly opened the box. The jewelry was missing some tacky gold and silver items, and the clothes were missing some simple and warm styles. Chichimu looked at the jewelry box. He didn't ask for it back. His intention of letting her wear his Chi family's hairpin was also thrown away. The hairpin was too simple and unadorned, not like gold, so she also didn't want it. Chichimu suddenly laughed, his laughter hoarse and ruthless. He fiercely smashed her jewelry box, his foot trampling over the hairpin, his expression terrifyingly sinister. He didn't just want to twist a melon. He wanted to stew it, boil it, and then force it to be eaten bit by bit. You'd better run further away, Wei Wei. Chapter 863. Wei Wei Bai sat in a carriage while a fine horse followed beside her. Miss Bai, the Yohu pavilion I mentioned is not far ahead. The carriage swayed. A slender white hand gently rested on the carriage's curtain, lifting it halfway. Wei Wei Bai smiled and poked her head out. I'll have to trouble Mr. Ping to send me on this trip. Ping Linqing was in his 30s, with a gentle and refined appearance. His eyes held a trace of reverence as he said, No, you and I have the same hobby, and we both like the same author, so we're close friends. Wei Wei Bai nodded. Right, I especially like Little Husband Don't Run. The monk and the Taoist priest loves you by madly loving a melon, as well as the matter of the young lady and the gardener and that dog. Ping Linqing's gentle expression also became excited. Close friends, The novel The Young Lady is simply his most classic work, written with sentimental sentiments, moving songs and tears, especially that part in Bed Cough Cough. Ping Linqing remembered that he was outside and immediately suppressed the excitement of meeting a close friend. Wei Wei Bai hurriedly agreed. Right, you and I think alike. Then old driver Bai and wretched old man Ping revealed the same knowing smile. Wei Wei Bai returned to the carriage once again. The system finally hugged its head. So, this is an ancient yellow novel fan meet and greet. Wei Wei Bai spread her hands. Otherwise, where would I go to find a man familiar with me? This kind of society had too many rules for women. She simply had no chance to meet other men. Even if she did, she wouldn't know them. Especially after marrying Chichimu. That man stared at her like he was staring at his family's treasure. He didn't let her expose herself at all. She wanted to find someone to pretend to elope with. What was more familiar than a fan meeting another fan? 2 wretched smiles in their eyes. Moreover, they were going to see the author together. For fans, this was simply an explosive, super good news. The system said, Why do I feel like you just want to see the weird author who wrote about dogs, humans and beasts. Wei Wei Bai said wretchedly. He, of course not. Am I such a wretched person? System, you are. Don't be so humble. If you keep being humble, you'll get beaten up. As soon as they arrived at the Yohu Pavilion, Wei Wei Bai and Ping Linqing walked side by side. A noble young master in white robes fluttered in the wind. It was a beautiful woman in a lotus-colored dress. They stood on a strangely matching piece. The scenery at the Touring Lake Pavilion was beautiful. White snow covered the lakeside, and the lake water was clear without any ice. The branches and leaves of the lotuses were exposed on the surface of the lake, giving it a unique flavor. Ping Linqing said, "We are the first readers to find this place. When I think of seeing the author I admire, my heart beats like a deer in March." Wei Wei Bai said, "I'm not just a deer. I wish I could turn into the ink in that book just to touch his hand." Ping Linqing's smile changed. "I want to become his chair and let him sit on me as he writes that beautiful chapter. How could a hardcore fan lose?" Wei Wei Bai snorted. "I want to become his eyes and be the first to see that sentimental novel. When it comes to protecting my life, I'm the first. Whoever loves the second can go." The expressions of the two readers were not right. Because they loved the same author, they felt like they were rivals. The air was filled with the smell of gunpowder. They glared at each other. The first signature later would be hers, his. Whoever came to snatch it would be an irreconcilable enemy. Pa! A teacup was placed heavily on the table and shattered. He stared coldly at the couple in the distance. How much did they like each other? How long had they been looking at each other? Download the at https://m sashu.com button at the bottom to record this chapter. Chapter 864. Sir Qi, a tall man in a black suit, bowed respectfully and said. Qi Chimu sat in the pavilion, pouring a new cup of water. What did you say they were talking about? The distance was too far to hear clearly, but the excited and joyful expressions on their faces could still be seen. The man was the third prince's head of secret guards and was highly skilled in martial arts. He had been borrowed by Qi Chimu to find someone. The man nodded. The distance is too far. I can only vaguely hear some. Qi Chimu indifferently lowered his eyes, no longer looking at the irksome scene not far away. He slowly turned the teacup, his voice suppressing some kind of emotion as he said, somewhat hoarsely, "Say what you heard." The man nodded, his face expressionless, his voice flat and emotionless. That man said to Madam, "You are the woman I admire. When I see you, my heart is like a deer in March, beating nonstop." Qi Chimu's hand paused in the middle of turning the teacup. Then he said softly and coldly, "What did Madam say?" The man said calmly, "Madam said, I am more than a deer. I wish I could turn into the ink in that book, just to touch your hand holding the brush. Turn into ink, directly pull it under the sun for a few months, and turn it into ink. Black to death." Qi Chimu's gums had a metallic taste, the blood from biting out of hatred. He didn't reveal any emotion, only saying indifferently, "Continue." The man said to Madam, "I want to turn into a chair for you to sit on and make a beautiful chapter." Then Madam replied, "I want to become your eyes and see every article you write." Because it was too far, many of the words he heard were missed. So the man combined the scene he saw to analyze the feelings of the eloping man and woman. He concluded that the other party was speaking words of love. So the words he missed, he automatically filled in for them. He felt that he did a good job. After Qi Chimu finished listening, he didn't show any expression, but the teacup in his hand cracked a few times. It was unknown how great the enmity was for a man with ordinary strength to crack a teacup. After the man finished his report, he calmly continued to stick to the pavilion's pillar, acting like he didn't exist. Because of these words, Qi Chimu sat in a daze for a good while. He had never heard even a single good word from Bai Weiwei's mouth. Even if there was, he was the one who forced it. He had never thought that she, who only knew how to prick people, could say such beautiful words of praise. She had really met the man she liked. That was why he was so passionate. When he thought of this, those words of praise turned into the most vicious knives, turning his heart upside down. His internal organs were in severe pain. It was much more painful than when he died in his previous life. His fingers kept trembling, and he didn't dare to look up at them in the distance. He was afraid that he would not be able to suppress the murderous intent in his heart. He couldn't be impulsive. If Wei Wei really fell in love with him, killing Na Ping or whatever would push her away completely. It would be best to lock up that dog of a man and torture him until he was either dead or alive for the rest of his life. Then he would ask Wei Wei to beg him for that man's life. She could only follow him for the rest of her life. There was nowhere to run. This was the best method. He slowly drank a mouthful of cold water, feeling that his mouth was full of the taste of blood. He stuck out the tip of his tongue and slowly licked the corner of his lips. He had used too much force and actually bit his lips until they bled. // Chapter 865. The head of the hidden guards beside him said, "Madam left with that man." Chi Chimu still had his head lowered, playing with the teacup. If someone familiar with him in the previous life knew what his actions represented, they would know that he was making a decision. He suddenly let out a heavy sigh and stood up. "Kill him." The head of the hidden guards immediately nodded. Then he turned and left. Chi Chimu also slowly got up, his movements slow and stiff, as if he was carrying a 1,000-June boulder on his back. As expected, after meeting her, there was no such thing as reason. He couldn't bear the existence of that man. He would rather die than let another man exist in her heart. If one existed, he would kill one. Not a single one of them could survive. Even if he knew that she hated him to the point of wanting to kill him, it didn't matter. He felt for a handkerchief in his hand. It was that ugly peony painting. He had also taken it from her hands. How ridiculous. The things that belonged to her in his hands were all snatched by him. It didn't matter. Chi Chimu's eyes were as cold as the cold abyss. He didn't care and continued to snatch it. At worst, he would perish together with her in this life. Wei Wei Bai and Ping Linqing laughed at each other, pushing and glaring at each other. The two people's footsteps became faster and faster, hating that they couldn't shake off the other. This was the first signature of their family. Whoever got it would be the king of hardcore fans. Ping Linqing suddenly fell down with a thump. Wei Wei Bai's eyes immediately lit up, and she rushed forward with a burst of strength. Ping Linqing was startled and immediately scrambled to chase after her, but his legs were too soft. Before he could take 2 steps, he stepped on a rock. With a splash, his entire person fell into the lake. He didn't see that there was a sharp dagger behind him, about to stab into his back. But before it could be stabbed, that person had already fallen into the lake. The head of the hidden guards appeared, coldly looking into the lake. The person hadn't appeared for so long. He should have frozen to death. He calmly and quickly put away the dagger, then turned and left. Wei Wei Bai saw that there was a unique courtyard in front of her, the door half open, revealing the begonia that had lost its petals and leaves. She knocked on the door, but no one answered. She was afraid that Ping Linqing would come after her, so she pushed the door open and entered. Ping Linqing had already informed the author that he would be visiting today. Walking through the door, he found that the surroundings were terrifyingly quiet. She didn't think too much about it and didn't want to ask the system. Although she loved Huang Wan, she loved the cute little author who created Huang Wan even more. But when he was mocked and ridiculed by the system, his heart still hurt. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai lifted the hem of her lotus-colored dress and walked forward slowly. She was surrounded by romantic flowers, and the shadows of the flowers were cast on her slender back, giving her a 30% brilliance and 70% elegance. She saw that the door of the hall in front of the courtyard was open and thought that the author was inviting guests in. Therefore, he stepped in very naturally. Then he stopped in his tracks. In front of her was a familiar figure, slender as bamboo. He raised his head and looked at the ambiguous pictures of nuns, monks, young ladies, gardeners, and so on in the middle of the hall. The faint sunlight shone on his body, bringing out a few thin strands of pale white, as if he was covered in snow. Wei Wei Bai took a few steps back, shock on her face. This was true shock. She roared at the system. Could it be that Chi Chimu is madly in love with a melon? Fuck, you can't judge a book by its cover. The system was also shocked. What misunderstanding do you have about the male lead? He is just a pervert, not a wretched person. That madly in love with a melon is still tied up and struggling in the backyard. Wei Wei Bai immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Chi Chimu isn't the author. /the Chapter 866. You can search Transmigration System. Male God, come over to search book www.sashu.com in Baidu to find the. The system was speechless for a moment before saying, if that's true, you'll probably be so scared that you won't be able to capture him. Wei Wei Bai's face was stern. You're wrong. If he really is an author, I reckon that I won't be able to capture him. I can immediately throw myself at him to hug his thigh. The author lived well, so they would produce more food. That way, readers wouldn't starve to death. So the author was her spiritual parent. The system suddenly didn't want to recognize this host. Why did other hosts read world classics and profound mathematics, physics, and chemistry? Its host was actually someone who felt a sense of superiority from reading little pornographic novels. Chi Chimu finally turned his head. He looked at her indifferently, his voice without the slightest trace of excitement. Wei Wei, you didn't tell me you were coming out. I was very worried when I didn't see you when I got home. Wei Wei Bai smiled awkwardly and said to the system, has my Imperial Examination Obstruction mission been completed yet? The system said flatly, no. Chi Chima didn't affect the completion of the examination at all, so the main system was dissatisfied and had you act out the elopement drama. At least personally tell the male lead that you want to elope and not come to see a pornographic novel author. Wei Wei Bai, the main system wants me to die, System, yes, admitting it so shamelessly. Wei Wei Bai took a deep breath. The capture strategy had reached this point, but Chi Chima's favorability hadn't dropped at all. Although the abnormal favorability rose very strangely, it wouldn't drop no matter what kind of blow encountered. This could be considered one of the benefits. She remembered that her Imperial Examination Obstruction mission hadn't been completed yet, so she could only brace herself and step forward. Chi Chimu, I gave you the letter. Did you read it? Chi Chimu chuckled in a low voice. His clearly gentle expression inexplicably carried traces of morbid gloom. He muttered to himself in a low voice, I read it, but I didn't think that although my Wei Wei's writing is vulgar and not very smooth, the emotions are sincere and touching. It makes one's internal organs burn, and life is worse than death. Wei Wei Bai, is he saying that her writing is so bad that it can poison him to death? She felt that there was something wrong with the atmosphere. Wei Wei Bai's instinctive reaction to perverts made her take a few steps back. Her body was ready to run. Chi Chimu acted as if he hadn't seen her actions. His eyes were very cold, his smile unchanged. So are you here to give me the divorce papers? Wei Wei Bai braced herself and said. The system said, I feel like he's here to give you a death notice. Wei Wei Bai. Chi Chimu took 2 steps forward, only to see Wei Wei Bai take several steps back. She straightened her thin back and raised her fair and slender neck high. Her snow-white, satin-like skin was tinged with a faint pink from excitement. This attitude was one of vigilance and uneasiness, but it was also so weak that it could not withstand a single blow. Chi Chimu slowly shook his head, his voice slow and flat. I'll come and give you something else. Then she watched helplessly as Chi Chimu took out a knife. The knife was so sharp that it flashed with a frightening white light. Wei Wei Bai saw it. Fuck, the favorability was only 92. Was this going to be a love, but not being able to get revenge drama? She took several steps back and was just about to run when the door slammed shut. Wei Wei Bai anxiously knocked on the door. Let me out, open the door, Chi Chimu was already behind her, his slender figure shrouding her, forcing her to curl up by the door with no place to escape. His expression was calm and gentle, but the knife in his hand didn't tremble in the slightest. Chi Chimu's eyes showed some pity. What's wrong? Why are you so afraid of me? Wei Wei Bai's face paled. Chi Chimu, what are you doing? Don't act recklessly. Killing is against the law. Your future is very good. If you kill me, you'll have nothing. Chi Chimu smiled faintly. The knife in his hand was already placed across her weak and pitiful neck. Then Wei Wei Bai heard him say, Be good, Wei Wei Bai, say you love me. Wei Wei Bai, who had a knife held against her. Oh, this unfolding was like a lunatic. Chi Chimu used a bit more force, and a trace of blood flowed down from her skin. His eyes narrowed slightly, the light in them warm to the point of madness. Say it. Say that from now on, I am the only one in your heart. Say that I make you infatuated, tossing and turning. Wei Wei Bai breathed laboriously. Chi Chimu, there's no meaning in forcing it. Chi Chimu gently shook his head, then said with a smile, I'll force you. If you don't say it, I'll kill you. Wei Wei Bai, he's forcing a melon. The melon is so scared, Slash. Chapter 867. Wei Wei Bai still had the elopement mission hanging over her head. She didn't dare to move, her small face deathly pale, a thin layer of sweat appearing on her forehead. The orchid fragrance on her body was even more alluring because of its owner's intense reaction. Chi Chimu's expression was indifferent. Only his pair of black eyes were bottomless. The knife in his hand was very steady, so steady that the little prey in front of him had no chance to escape. The woman in front of him was still that little bastard who hid vicious thoughts in her heart and was cruel to the people she didn't like. He had always known that she didn't like him, but in the beginning, it was only for revenge to obtain the pleasure of tormenting her. Later, his heart began to soften, and he couldn't help but want her to smile. When she smiled at him, his heart turned into spring snow. And now, it was an obsession that couldn't be obtained. His voice was slightly hoarse. Wei Wei, I know you're afraid of death, so just say, love me. Even if it was self-deception, it could make him once again summon up the courage to imprison her and walk down this path together. Just once was enough. Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened. Saying, I love you guaranteed that the favorability would be over 95. The system tugged at her ear and said, quick, say the elopement line and the small mission will be complete. Wei Wei Bai, I want to say I love him. System, say it, we'll dance together with the dog. Wei Wei Bai, this world really made people despair for no reason. Bai Wei Wei was on the verge of collapsing. Her face was pale, and she was so scared that her lips lost color. She seemed to want to curl herself into non-existent air, tightly pursing her lips. Her eyes were somewhat red, extremely pitiful. Chi Chimu, who do you think you are? My older brother died because of you. I hate you to death. You're clearly a poor boy with no power, no foundation, eating my family's food and drinking my family's water. Yet you don't know how to be grateful. You only know how to threaten me and harm me. Speaking to this point, she choked with sobs, tears threatening to fall from her eyes. Stubbornly sad. This was an expression that had never appeared on her face before. Chi Chimu very much wanted to refute. He had lost his dignity in her home, living precariously. It wasn't good at all. Her brother also deserved to die. It was only natural for him to hate the Bai family. But looking at her red and fragile expression, he couldn't say a word. Wei Wei Bai widened her eyes, baring her fangs and brandishing her claws like a paper tiger. You even forced me to marry you and treated me like that. I'm not the kind of person who will forgive you generously. I will take revenge for the smallest grievance. Whoever angers me, I will make them pay back 100-fold. Today, even if you kill me, I will tell you that I eloped. I want to anger you to death. As soon as the word elope appeared, the word complete immediately appeared on the small mission evaluation. When Chi Chimu heard her words, he was stunned for a long time. He was originally an intelligent person. He immediately caught the main point of her words. Didn't you elope with that pale-faced scholar because you liked him? Because he asked urgently, he used a bit of strength on the knife, and a drop of blood immediately fell from her dazzling white neck. This drop of blood instantly caused Chi Chimu's muscles to tighten. He gritted his teeth and endured the stabbing pain in his heart. He didn't move the knife away and continued. You don't like him. It's just to anger me, right? Wei Wei Bai sneered, but her smile was somewhat stiff. She suddenly gritted her teeth and reached out with both hands to grasp the blade. She had always been delicate and afraid of pain. Chi Chimu didn't expect her to do this at all. Slash the Chapter 868. He let go of the knife, but Wei Wei Bai changed direction midway, narrowly grabbing the handle. Then she gripped the knife, the tip of the knife immediately pointing at his chest. The knife was a bit heavy, and her wrist was slender and weak, so the knife trembled slightly. Chi Chimu didn't retreat, standing steadily like this, not caring in the slightest about the knife in her hand. He gritted his teeth and asked word by word, "Is that so? You don't like him. You just want to anger me." Wei Wei Bai sneered with reddened eyes. "I just want to anger you to death. I also deliberately wrote my admiration for another man into a love letter and stuffed it into your exam box, just to disturb your mind in the exam room and make you fail the exam." She clearly said it so sinister and vicious. But tears fell from her soft white face, silently crying and crushing his heart. He suddenly realized something and took a step forward. The knife was pressed against his chest, the tip immediately piercing into his flesh. Wei Wei Bai jumped in fright, worry and fear flashing through her eyes. She immediately retreated nervously. But there was only so much space to retreat, and he didn't have the slightest concern for his life. Instead, as if wanting to prove something, he took a few more steps forward. The place where the knife pierced into his flesh was immediately dyed red with blood. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. She was afraid and distressed, and wanted to let go of her hand and throw away the knife. But without waiting for her to let go, Chi Chimu's palm had already firmly gripped her fingers, making it impossible for her to throw away the knife. He was so close to her. The scent of orchids and the smell of blood intertwined. A suffocating smell. Just as he was about to take another step and let the knife stab into his chest and pierce through his heart, Wei Wei Bai finally collapsed. She shouted, "You're crazy. Chi Chimu, let go of me." Chi Chimu's gloomy brows relaxed. His chest was injured, but for the first time, the heartache he felt after learning of her elopement didn't hurt. A gentle smile appeared on his face. "You said you love me." Wei Wei Bai was so scared that her eyelashes trembled. Her face was pale, and she looked like she was about to faint at any moment. She gasped, "Let go of me and move back." She was even more scared than when he pointed a knife at her. Chi Chimu stared blankly at her. His emotions suddenly broke through the barriers in his heart and surged forth. He even felt his nose ache a little. "Say you love me. Otherwise, I'll continue walking." This kind of threat was so ridiculous. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have been forced into a dead end. She raised her head, and her pale face was full of contempt. "Do you really think I don't dare to kill you? I don't believe you dare to come here." Chi Chimu only looked at her deeply. Then he slowly raised his foot and was about to continue walking. This step was the border between life and death. There was only a thin line between the tip of the knife and his heart. Wei Wei Bai finally couldn't hold on any longer. Her lips trembled, and she was on the verge of collapse. Her voice was hoarse as she shouted, I love you, Chi Chimu." When he heard these words, he was stunned for a moment before revealing a smile. This smile was different from his usual scheming and calculating sneer. It also wasn't like the smile of desire on the edge of the bed. Instead, it was pure joy. He was so happy that even his eyes, as dark as the abyss, were filled with light. So handsome that it made people's hearts pound. He let go, and the blood-stained knife in her hand immediately fell to the ground. Wei Wei Bai couldn't stand steadily. Her entire body trembled as she sat on the ground. She raised her head to look at Chi Chimu, like she was scared silly. Chi Chimu didn't care about his injuries and slowly crouched down. Then he stretched out his hands and gently hugged Wei Wei Bai's trembling body, his fingers almost faintly curling around her. // download / Chapter 869. It was as if he was afraid of disturbing her. He murmured softly, his voice as soft as water. Wei Wei Bai, you really like me. She couldn't bear to hurt him. Her reluctance was liking. She didn't dare to say love, as long as there was a bit of liking. It was hard to suppress her joy. Wei Wei Bai looked up, her eyelashes trembling as tears streamed down her cheeks. Chi Chimu, I hate you. But he didn't feel uncomfortable. Instead, he hugged her with greater strength. Then he rested his head on her shoulder, his warm breath brushing against her red ears. But I like you very much. Ding! Male lead's favorability has increased to 95. Chichimu's wound was light, and the bleeding quickly stopped. He reached out, held by Weiwei in his arms, and walked straight out. During this time, his physical strength had improved a lot. Weiwei Bai's weight was no longer a burden to him. The head of the shadow guards saw his chest stained with blood, carrying a frightened and adorable girl as cute as a jade dumpling out, and then ordered him to bring the carriage over with a smile on his face. The shadow guard was silent for a few seconds, but he still dutifully took out the best golden gun medicine and sprinkled it on Chichimu. In any case, this kind of wound was so shallow that he wouldn't die. The carriage arrived, and they quickly left. In the carriage, Weiwei Bai was tightly held in Chichimu's arms. She still had a dazed expression, but Chichimu was very gentle, gently stroking her hair as if he was petting a cat. His movements were tender and satisfied. It was a bit perverted. The system coughed lightly. What scared Silly? The turn just now was a bit too fast, causing it to twist its waist. It was the first time it had seen eloping to the point of increasing favorability. Weiwei Bai said blankly, I forgot. System? ? Weiwei Bai became excited. I forgot to ask for madly infatuated a Melon's autograph. It must have been taken by that idiot Ping Linqing. System? Weiwei Bai, don't you think it's a pity, painful and unbearable? System? Painful. Could its host's brain be a little practical? What the hell is in there? Not long after they left, in the ice lake, a deathly white hand poked out of the water eerily. Then it was a human head. Ping Linqing struggled out of the lake with a twisted face. He trembled and said, I hate it so much. How can my virgin signature be taken away by someone else? I won't die until I get the signature. Then he steeled himself, climbed out of the water, and continued to climb in the direction of the house. After Weiwei Bai went back, her stomach hurt. Perhaps it was because she was too excited that her period came, but she actually had menstrual cramps. Her face was pale as she nestled in the bedding. A red thread stretched out of the bed curtain. The imperial physician borrowed from the third prince was speaking with Chichimu. It sounded vaguely like she was having difficulties in having children or something. Weiwei Bai finally thought of this. Will I get pregnant? The system replied, No, I can simulate a fake one for you, but your body can't give birth to a child. Weiwei Bai asked why. The system replied, You're not a person of this plane. You can only be a passerby. You can't have a real connection with the people of this plane. Weiwei Bai pondered for a moment. She understood. After all, letting people enter the mission role, although she didn't know what benefits it would bring to the main system. But if an employee developed feelings for the mission of the plane, or even a child, then the feelings would definitely be different and the employee might not want the mission anymore. So there definitely wouldn't be such a thing as child. Chapter 870. His eyes were dyed with light, bringing out a scorching temperature. It was a simple sentence, but it was so humble and real that it moved people. Weiwei Bai stared at him blankly, a faint blush suddenly appearing on her white face. She seemed unable to face his treatment and turned her face away. What's the use of you saying this? You must be thinking of how to bully me in your heart. I don't believe it. Her tone, however, was not an aggressive attack. Instead, it carried traces of unconsciously shyness and unease. Like a little fluffy bird, she wished she could bury her head and hide. Seeing her like this, Chichimu's heart brightened. She wasn't without feelings for him. He pulled out a white towel and wiped her feet clean. Then his tone was still indifferent and somewhat warm as he said, Sweet words are indeed too insignificant. You and I still have a lifetime, and time will reveal a person's heart. How about I write you a note, and you can ask whatever you want. If I let you down in the future, let me be plagued with illness and be lonely and trapped for a lifetime. Weiwei Bai stared at him blankly, as if she felt that he was a different person. Chichimu didn't feel that his feelings had changed too quickly. He had always controlled everything in his own hands, and his feelings for her came unexpectedly. His feelings for her were unexpectedly heavy. He wasn't the kind of person who was used to running away. Once he confirmed his commitment, he would firmly bite Wei Wei Bai and not let go. Then he would treat her well for the rest of his life. But Wei Wei Bai still had the temper of a child. She couldn't distinguish between good and evil, and her temperament was also wavering. She must be alarmed and suspicious because of his feelings. Chi Chimu also didn't expect her to give a positive response. As long as she didn't have an affair, he would slowly teach her feelings in the future. Her body was trained by him, and her feelings were also trained by him. Chi Chimu stroked her delicate little feet, his eyes deepening. He inwardly swallowed his saliva. Such a good time to confess, but he still suppressed his desire, lest she feel that he wasn't serious. Suddenly, he heard a soft response. Okay. Chi Chimu suddenly raised his head, his eyes clear and intense. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head and gritted her teeth. You're the one who said it. Give me a call. In the future, I'll be sick and lonely for the rest of my life. Not only that, I'll be eaten by dogs after I die. Chi Chimu didn't answer, instead carefully and gently putting on her shoes and socks. Then, he poured the foot-washing water away. Wei Wei Bai frowned. She thought that he was just joking, but Chi Chimu had already returned. He deftly picked her up and walked to the desk, placing her in a chair. He personally spread out the paper and ground the ink. Tell me, what do you want me to do? I'll do it if I can. Wei Wei Bai looked at her suspiciously, but her face was getting redder and redder, and even her eyes were watery. She suppressed the tremor in her voice as she spoke. In the future, you can only have me as your wife. You're not allowed to have concubines. You're not allowed to have women outside. No, you're not allowed to even look at them. This was a request that most men couldn't fulfill. But Chi Chimu very calmly wrote it down, and even deliberately wrote it in detail. No matter which of the 7 crimes she committed, including not having a child, it couldn't be violated. Also, you have to treat me well, very well, very well. You can't lie to me, harm me, bully me. Chi Chimu also wrote it down, but he deliberately emphasized, the premise is that I don't hurt you. If the truth was to hurt her, then he would rather deceive her. Wei Wei Bai didn't think so much. She tilted her head and softly muttered, how can you hurt me? You could just write it. At https://www.sashu.com/full text at https://www.sashu.com download text at https://www.sashu.com mobile text at https://m/sashu.com. Chapter 871. Regarding the side mission's insane punishment mechanism. Wei Wei Bai was already powerless to ridicule. The system was still munching on melon seeds. What's the matter? Is it intense? Still riding 6'9"? Wei Wei Bai, go read your socialist core values. Chi Chimu did as he said. A good husband with 24 filial exemplars. That considerate appearance made even Madame Bai, who is so vicious and critical of Chi Chimu, feel relieved. Chi Chimu had really been bewitched by his daughter to the point of confusion. The things he did were things that men disdain to do. He was so considerate to his wife that he did everything by himself. If it weren't for his excellent knowledge, winning 2 major prizes in a row, directly entering the emperor's eyes and summoning him long before the court examination, he would be poked at in the back and scolded as a softy, losing face as a man. Therefore, Madame Bai completely gave up on monitoring Chi Chimu. With Wei Wei Bai, Chi Chimu would really become an official in the future. Wouldn't he be at the mercy of the Bai family? Wei Wei Bai blushed, her feet pinched by Chi Chimu as he put on her shoes. Chi Chimu, people are saying that you're not like a man. In fact, in modern society, Chi Chimu's appearance was also abnormal. Clothes, shoes, and even jewelry, he had to personally ask about them and personally handle them. Wei Wei Bai would sometimes hug the system and tremble. Chi Chimu seems to be a control freak. Love isn't like this. His control over her was just short of building a cage, breaking her limbs, and letting her turn into a doll by his side for him to dress up and manipulate. If it weren't for the bright 98 favorability points, she didn't dare to believe what his love was. System. Love is something that depends on the person. Some people are healthy since childhood, have a sound family, and normal 3 views. If they love someone deeply, of course they respect and love them. Even if you want to remarry, they will let you go with a smile, bearing a lifetime of pain alone, only asking you to be happy. Wei Bai. Thinking about it this way, Chi Chimu's body was once crippled, his family annihilated, and his 3 views warped. Love is indeed not quite right. The system said the male lead is the type of person who loves his lover so much that if you don't go with me, we'll die together. In short, if I can't live, you'll have to die a horrible death as well. Wei Bai. After listening to the analysis, I feel even colder. After Chi Chimu finished dressing her up, he said with an indifferent expression, "You are such a forgetful person. Recently, I have been close to the 3rd prince. Some people want to secretly harm me. I am afraid that the people around you are not reliable, so I personally watch over you." Wei Bai said hesitantly, "What does this have to do with you helping me put on my shoes and clothes?" Chi Chimu. "Because others may poison your shoes and clothes." Wei Bai. What a lofty reason. Did he think that she didn't see the perverted smile in his eyes when he helped her put on her shoes and pinch her feet? He was clearly a perverted control freak. Because Chi Chimu had been close to the 3rd prince recently, he was viewed as a thorn in the side of the crown prince and the popular 5th prince. In particular, he had schemed to have the emperor let the 3rd prince return to the center of power and help the 3rd prince accomplish several good deeds that benefited the country and the people. This caused the 3rd prince's prestige to rise. So the enemy camp hated him to death, and his weakness was Wei Bai. Others would indeed make a move on her first. Chi Chimu was clear in his heart that in this life, although he had the upper hand and could accomplish many things ahead of time, but in this life he had an additional weak spot, so he could only guard her even more carefully. The 3rd prince held a flower-admiring banquet and invited the family of his trusted aides to go together. Recently, the old emperor's health had deteriorated. He knew that the old emperor would be able to hold out until the beginning of spring. So he had already formulated a plan with the 3rd prince to catch the crown prince and the 5th prince in one fell swoop. Chapter 872. And the flower-admiring banquet was a cover-up. At the flower-admiring banquet, Chi Chimu jumped out of the carriage, and Wei Bai lifted the curtain. He had already reached out to hold her waist and lightly carried her out of the carriage, placing her on the ground. Wei Bai blushed, discovering that many noble ladies were looking over. She couldn't help but frown and stomp her feet. "Restrain yourself outside. What are you doing?" Chi Chimu smiled, casually reaching out to tuck a strand of hair from her cheek behind her ear. "The people outside are indeed a bit talkative. Later, I have something to do and will leave for a while. If someone bullies you, you could directly bully them back. I'm here." He was neither too big nor too small and could be considered a golden thigh. He could support her. Wei Bai was somewhat hesitant. "Won't I cause you trouble?" Chi Chimu said in a low voice. "If you cause me trouble, I'll happily accept it. Feel free to provoke." Wei Bai glanced at him suspiciously, then turned and proudly raised her head to walk forward. "Who will cause trouble? You speak as if I will cause trouble." Her long skirt fluttered, the long ribbons of her skirt fluttering in the air. Her dainty face was taut, her pair of eyes black and bright. Chi Chimu couldn't help but reach out to grasp her ribbon, allowing it to slide along his fingers. Just like her skin was so soft and smooth. He didn't care about the astonished gazes of others and naturally stood behind Wei Bai, following her. If it weren't for his outstanding figure and cold and arrogant temperament, others would have thought that he was Wei Bai's servant. They entered the banquet. As expected, Chi Chimu saw the 3rd prince give him a look. He leaned close to Wei Bai's ear. "Wait for me to come back. If you're hungry, eat something. Don't run around, or else I won't be able to find you when I come back." Saying this, he didn't care how ambiguous his posture was and stood up to leave. After he left, Wei Bai also had a calm expression. She looked at the charming women in the courtyard. He felt that he should be admiring these beauties instead of flowers. There was even a stage set up, and Yaya was singing something that no one knew. Wei Wei Bai ate the pastries and ignored the others, silently calculating how much time was left. He could not allow the main quest to be completed too early. Wei Wei Bai had just finished eating a piece of white cake when a fragrant wind blew over. She looked up and saw a woman in a scarlet dress. She had a pair of bright eyes and looked very arrogant. Wei Wei Bai looked up at her, but didn't get up. She didn't even ask what she was going to do. The woman looked Bai Wei Wei up and down, then suddenly sneered. As expected of someone from small family. With such a petty appearance, how could he have the face to stay here? Bai Wei Wei looked at her indifferently. She continued to take a beautiful flour cake and nibble on it. She was truly tired from dealing with Chi Chimu. As for the passerby, he had no intention of dealing with him at all. She felt that apart from Chi Chimu, she was surrounded by grass. She was a Buddhist. The woman saw that she was delicate and weak and looked at her expressionlessly. She thought that Wei Wei Bai was scared stiff and couldn't speak. She became even more sarcastic. I am the pearl of the Prime Minister's palm, Chunabeo. You still haven't paid your respects when you see me. Wei Wei Bai, this appearance, this simple and crude line that didn't go through the brain. Could the author write a little more carefully? Even a passerby, it didn't need to casually give someone such a stupid line without IQ. Chunabeo saw that she was still ignoring her and suddenly sneered. Young Master Chi is such a good man, but he was forced by you to marry you. You, a withered flower plundered by bandits, what qualifications do you have to stand by his side? Wei Wei Bai looked at her indifferently and then said indifferently, Oh. Chunabeo stifled a bellyful of anger and was almost suffocated to death by her one word. Chunabeo was furious and immediately had her lackey maid come over. Slap her mouth for me. Wei Wei Bai sighed. Why did this woman have to make things difficult for another woman? Why did the cannon fodder have to make things difficult for her, this pitiful attacker? She slowly got up, and the system notified that Chi Chimu had returned. Wei Wei Bai was very elegant. She reached out and adjusted the flower hairpin on her head, then opened her mouth and sneered. What? The Prime Minister's daughter hates marriage so much, drooling over someone else's husband. Do you want to be my husband's concubine or an outside wife? Chunabeo choked, her face flushing red. You, Wei Wei Bai said innocently. What about me, ah? Your eyes are glued to my husband. How about I give you a chance? You serve me tea right now, and I'll recognize you as my younger sister. Chunabeo had never suffered this kind of humiliation and was about to slap her face. Wei Wei Bai nimbly dodged and ruthlessly slapped back. So what if you're the Prime Minister's daughter? Everyone has the right to punish a mistress. Chunabeo covered her face in disbelief. She was about to scream for people to chop Wei Wei Bai up. Wei Wei Bai suddenly broke into a run and rushed into Chi Chimu's arms, who had just walked over. Husband, she bullied me. Chunabeo, I've never seen such a thick-skinned and shameless person. Slash. Chapter 873. Chi Chimu saw that Wei Wei Bai was bullying people, so shameless, so good at framing people, and even complained to him. He was relieved. He gently took out a handkerchief and wiped her hand. Does it hurt? Hitting someone would hurt too. Wei Wei Bai lowered her eyelashes and pursed her lips, looking indescribably innocent and pitiful. It hurts. Chi Chimu hurriedly blew on her hand. I'll wash it when we get back and then apply medicine. This corny action made Wei Wei Bai and everyone present, including the system, tremble. Wei Wei Bai said to the system in disgust, I purely wanted to disgust Chi Chimu and make his favorability drop by 1 or 2 points. Helping a villain do evil, being arrogant and vicious in front of people, but acting obedient and seeking shortcuts behind people's backs should be the most loathsome. In the end, Chi Chimu, this pervert, had nothing to do with the people of Earth. This brain logic was simply crazy. She couldn't disgust him, but disgust herself. The system sighed faintly. This is love, Wei Wei Bai. After Chi Chimu finished wiping her hand, his expression was gentle as he reached out to wrap his arm around her thin shoulder and walked out. When he walked to Chinabeo's side, he spoke in a neither light nor heavy tone. If you want to find a plaything for your husband to be his concubine, you should choose a good one. A woman with a dull face, a vicious heart, and looks like an old woman in her 50s. If she really lowers her head to give you tea, she won't be afraid of wronging your husband. Wei Wei Bai suddenly fell silent. This poisonous tongue could drive a person to death. She couldn't bear to add oil to the fire. Chunabeo's complexion was deathly pale, and her body went limp. Two female servants immediately supported her. Her lips trembled as she said, "Chi Chimu, you actually dare to treat me like this. Who do you think you are? If I hadn't flattered and curried favor with the prince, how could I have allowed a poor scholar like you to come here?" The third prince's flower-admiring banquet wasn't something ordinary people could enter. Chi Chimu's status was the lowest among the people invited. Her voice was somewhat mournful. Her status was clearly higher than that of the couple, but her imposing manner was completely lacking. Chi Chimu glanced at her indifferently, then frowned, as though looking at her had dirted his eyes. He couldn't be bothered to refute. He didn't even want to look at her, not to mention talking to her. Chi Chimu lowered his head and whispered softly to Bai Weiwei. What was originally a peaceful and quiet place has been disturbed by the barking of evil dogs. We should hurry and leave BA, lest we be dirted by those filthy and ugly people who rely on their power to bully others. Wei Wei Bai looked at Chun Abeo sympathetically. The Prime Minister's pearl. After being humiliated by Chi Chimu, if word got out, it would be difficult for her to marry in the future. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but whisper, "It's not a vicious dog. She didn't do anything." Chi Chimu's eyes were filled with indulgence, his tone soft and sticky. "You're so kind, Wei Wei." The crowd at the scene and the system. Could he be any more blatant in his blatant lies? He felt as though he was in contrast to this vicious and twisted couple. Chunabeo's arrogance and despotism had also become straightforward and natural, delicate and cute. After Chi Chimu returned home, as expected, he fetched clean water and washed her hands, one finger at a time, until they were clean. Wei Wei Bai watched his serious expression, his hands meticulous and gentle. He didn't seem to feel that bending his body to do this was very lowly. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but say, "I lied to you. No one bullied me. I bullied others." In that scene, anyone with eyes would know that she was the one who bullied Chinabeo. Chi Chimu gave a faint and before saying, "You know how to bully others and protect yourself." "I'm very happy. Fast crossover system. Male God, come over here, /fast crossover system. Male God, come over here, / fast crossover system. Male God, come over here. Download fast crossover system. Male God, come over here. Fast crossover system. Male God, come over here." Chapter 874. Wei Wei Bai carefully looked up at him before whispering, "Don't you dislike my vicious and perverse personality?" He smiled. "Why would I dislike it? My personality has never been good. We should be a match made in heaven." Was this how a match made in heaven was used? Wei Wei Bai finally admitted defeat and said to the system, "I only ask that the favorability doesn't rise. If it falls, don't be delusional." System, "This is love." Wei Wei Bai, "If you love me again, I'll let you fuck a dog." System, when Chi Chimu wiped her hands, he suddenly softened his voice. "Wei Wei Bai, in 3 years, I will stand in a position where no one will dare to bully you. At that time, I will not let those who bullied you off so easily." Today, his status was still too low. A few words of verbal humiliation were not enough to make her situation much better. "Wei Wei Bai, I didn't get bullied." She spoke the truth. The woman who was humiliated was much more miserable than she was. She could see that Chun Abao liked Chi Chimu. Humiliation from the man she liked. It was more painful than being stabbed with a knife. Chi Chimu only smiled but did not continue speaking. Wait until he grasped the power of his previous life. Whoever dared to provoke him, he would first cut off their tongue, dig out their eyes, and throw them into the mass grave to feed the wild dogs. With this comparison, Chi Chimu suddenly realized that Wei Wei Bai was not the least bit vicious. In his previous life, he was a person whose personality had already been twisted, a person who walked the path of darkness. Vicious and cold, it really penetrated his bones. He couldn't help but gently place a kiss on her wrist. "You are really kind." Wei Wei Bai. Before the court examination, Chi Chimu's plan with the third prince gradually grew. Although he had grasped the plan, he would still occasionally feel tired. Every time he was tired, he couldn't help but look at Wei Wei Bai. After looking, he would feel that life was so promising. Then, they were motivated to work hard for their future. Wei Wei Bai kept a close eye on the favorable impression points every day. She was afraid that she would do something out of line and cause the favorable impression points to suddenly fill up. She counted the days and wished that the next day would be the court examination. During this time, Chi Chimu became more and more tired of her. Other than the time when it was necessary to plot against others, even when he was reading and writing, he wanted her to be by his side. Slowly, the days passed peacefully and sweetly. When the snow melted, the peach, plum, and apricot blossoms began to hang on the branches. Chi Chimu could finally begin to prepare for the final exam. During this period of sweet days with Wei Wei Bai, he and the third prince had successfully tripped up the crown prince and caused Prime Minister Chun to lose most of his power. Meanwhile, the fifth prince was involved in the investigation of molesting the emperor's concubine. Let the fifth prince win the emperor's heart again. Chi Chimu also had a lot of insidious methods to pull out all of his favor. When the truth of the case was revealed, he would design another case of witchcraft to frame him for cursing the emperor to die early and destroy the fifth prince's power. In any case, the emperor's body was truly rotten. After he finished the court examination, the emperor died in less than half a month. After the emperor died, the fifth prince would definitely lose any possibility of succeeding the throne, and the third prince was the biggest winner. In this life, Chi Chimu didn't even use his family's wealth and left much more smoothly than in his previous life. On the morning of the court examination, Wei Wei Bai was shaken awake in a daze. Chi Chimu fed her some water and helped her put on her clothes and shoes. Carrying the things for the imperial examination, he took Wei Wei Bai out the door. TV. Chapter 875. The sky was still dark. Bai Wei Wei didn't wake up until she got into the carriage. "What's the matter? Where are we going?" Chi Chimu took out the millet porridge that had been warm since yesterday and filled a bowl for Wei Wei Bai to eat. Wei Wei Bai drank in a daze. She had stuffed a note into the wooden box she gave him for the exam last night. She thought that he would carry the box to the exam early. But in the end, he actually carried her here. Chi Chimu slowly drank the porridge. He said, "Inviting you to see the beautiful scenery." Wei Wei Bai yawned and muttered in dissatisfaction, "What beautiful scenery in the dark, ah." Chi Chimu smiled, but didn't speak. The carriage traveled for a while before stopping. Chi Chimu lifted the curtain and let Wei Wei Bai come over. "Look, Wei Wei, this is my path to the light." Wei Wei Bai looked out with a face full of question marks. She saw a 10-li long street, majestic and full of lanterns. There were people everywhere, the lanterns in their hands illuminating the dark sky. Chi Chimu said, 10 years of cold study is just for today, and I will step on this group of scholars and ascend to the highest position. Wei Wei Bai said, "What if you're not careful and fail the role?" Chi Chimu, "If I fail the role, I will be very sad and will lean on you to cry." Wei Wei Bai thought of that scene, and her face paled. She immediately waved her hand to drive him away. "Roll away. Quickly go get your first place." Chi Chimu saw her cute little appearance and couldn't help but plant a kiss on her soft and tofu cheeks. In public, Wei Wei Bai was so angry that her face turned red. "What if someone sees Chi Chimu?" Chi Chimu smiled as he got off the carriage. Wearing a white robe and a blue robe, he casually picked up the lantern on the side of the carriage and walked into the crowd. He looked back at her several times before unhesitatingly throwing himself into the sea of people for the last time. Wei Wei Bai suddenly realized why he had brought her here. The so-called beautiful scenery. She was just looking at Chi Chimu. He wanted her to stand here and watch him take his first steps to power. Wei Wei Bai lifted the curtain. Her face was as white as snow. After a long time, she slowly lowered the curtain. By stopping him from taking the Imperial examinations this time, does that mean that the side quest has been completed? She remembered that in the plot, after Chi Chimu became the top scorer, he basically met gods, killed gods, met devils, killed devils. The people of the Bai clan could only be abused by him. So, there shouldn't be any side quests after this. The system coughed lightly. Now that you've completed the small mission of stopping the Imperial examinations, there's still one more small mission to complete. Wei Wei Bai looked haggard. Another small task? The system said, give him a cup of poisonous tea and send him to heaven. Wei Wei Bai, she suddenly wanted to lie down. Actually, it wasn't that unbearable to spend a night with a dog, right? The side mission of this plane would definitely kill her, without a doubt. Wei Wei Bai thought of the note she had stuffed in and finally couldn't help but say, if he saw the note and his favorability increased to 100, I would have played for nothing. After all, when she stuffed the note, she had considered that after passing the obstacle of the Imperial examinations, the side quest should be completed directly. So, the things written on the note, in addition to thoroughly disturbing Chi Chimu's mind, could also make him unable to restrain his joy and increase his favorability towards her. But she had overlooked that damned poisonous tea plot. The system also glanced at the note. It really admired Wei Wei Bai for being able to think of such a bizarre reason to stop it. It thought that the Green Hat love letter was already powerful enough. Chapter 876. As a result, the obstruction note in the palace examination went up another level. Wei Wei Bai sat in the carriage, her hand supporting her forehead, incomparably sleepy. But when it was about time to reach home, the carriage didn't stop. Wei Wei Bai suddenly opened her eyes, clear and sharp. She said, Tongzi, what's the situation outside? The system was as calm as the wind. We were kidnapped. Wei Wei Bai, who kidnapped you? System, passerby, the fifth prince and cannon fodder, Chinabeo. Chi Chimu helping the third prince led to the fifth prince's mad counterattack. Wei Wei Bai was the first to be brought out for revenge. Wei Wei Bai sighed. Being loved is also a heavy burden. Chi Chimu's love for me is really too famous. People don't retaliate against him and just catch me to torture. If it weren't for the fact that favorability didn't lie, she could come up with conspiracy theories. Chi Chimu, this scheming boy, wanted to set up a target and dote on her, but in fact, it was just to use her as a shield. She was very sure that Chi Chimu, that guy, would do it. Kidnapping wasn't a big deal. Bai Wei Wei closed her eyes again and continued to take a nap. She woke up early and didn't have the energy. Chi Chimu didn't look at the note Wei Wei Bai gave him this time. She wouldn't harm him. He saw through her very clearly. She was moved by him. He was also very clear about it. The soldiers searching him strangely glanced at the note and found no place to hide the note, so he put it back. Chi Chimu smiled. Sure enough, that note wasn't a cheat note. Although he didn't know what she wrote, the soldier didn't show any particularly shocked expression. Therefore, the words on the note shouldn't be anything shocking. He entered the examination hall. The environment of the palace examination was particularly good. This examination would last for a full day until sunset. Although the emperor's health wasn't good, he would still find time to come over. He knew these steps by heart. He opened the test paper. Sure enough, it was the same test paper as in his previous life. Chi Chimu's expression was indifferent as he laid out the paper and ground it, his movements neither fast nor slow. Because the answer to the question had been prepared for a year, he picked up the pen and wrote it down without even using draft paper. Other people had to write a draft and then copy it, but he had saved a lot of time. Therefore, he finished the questions that were supposed to last the entire day before noon. He was afraid that he would stand out too much. He pretended to be incomplete. As for Wei Wei Bai's note, it was still under the paperweight. He had not read it yet. After he finished writing the question, he finally took the paper and unfolded it to read the words on it. It was a simple line of words. There were no fancy adjectives. I am pregnant, Chi Chimu. Chi Chimu was stunned. A wave of ecstasy suddenly swept through his heart. His breathing was labored, and he was at a loss. His body felt as heavy as lead. It turned out that when one was extremely happy, one's body would not relax at all. She was pregnant. They had a child. Chichimu couldn't help but giggle foolishly. His fingers tightly pinched that line of characters, constantly rubbing against it. Really good. Really too good. He had never felt that life was so good. His eyes were even moist with tears. He lowered his head and wiped them away. For a person who had been lonely for 2 lifetimes, at this moment, life had almost reached perfection. His ecstasy continued to surge, but he suddenly realized that something was wrong. The paper was somewhat thick. He tried to rub it with his fingers and found that it was 2 pieces of paper that were tightly posted. He carefully tore it open and found that on the next page, there was a paragraph written on it. Full text // download. Chapter 877. These words extinguished all the joy in his heart. I lied to you. The doctor told me that my body has lost the ability to be a mother. Chichimu almost didn't dare to look down. She knew. She must also know that she couldn't have children because he had pushed her into the ice water. Would she blame him? I don't blame you, but I want to cling to you for a lifetime. When these words entered his eyes, Chichimu choked up for a moment. She didn't blame him. She suddenly felt that the child wasn't important. Her clinging to him was the most important. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 99. Wei Bai heard the favorability prompt and knew that her slip of paper should have been discovered by Chichimu. She wasn't tied up. The people tied up were all members of the Bai family. The 5th prince's expression was sinister. He hadn't had a good time recently, so his temper was particularly bad. Wei Bai was terrified. Who are you? Why did you tie us up? The 5th prince sneered. I just gave you the 5-step powder. After today, you will die tomorrow without the antidote. The people in your family also drank the same medicine. Wei Bai's face was deathly pale. She looked at him in bewilderment. What enmity does our Bai family have with you that you want to retaliate against us like this? The 5th prince threw the teacup on the table, his expression sinister. Retaliating against you is not enough. I wanted to go back and poison Chichimu. If he dies, you live. If he lives, your entire family will die. The bound Madame Bai's expression immediately changed. Sana, you have to do it. Otherwise, the Bai family will be ruined and mother will also die. The other members of the Bai family immediately nodded. Right. Kill Chichimu and come save us. In any case, you didn't like Chichimu at first. Kill him and find a better man for you. Wei Bai furrowed her brows. The flower pattern Chichimu had drawn on her forehead was particularly beautiful and exquisite, setting her off to be even more charming and moving. The 5th prince glanced at her and suddenly raised an eyebrow. You killing Chichimu will count as your merit. When I inherit the throne in the future, I will bestow you a consort and let your family rise to the heavens with chickens and dogs. Chichimu was the 3rd prince's most formidable military advisor behind the scenes. Killing Chichimu was not only revenge, but also severing the 3rd prince's limbs. Without Chichimu's brain, just by relying on the 3rd prince's scheming, he definitely wouldn't be able to win against him. Chichimu's methods were ruthless, his mind clear, and he was an expert at playing with power. Clearly, he had never been an official before. However, he was like a 1,000-year-old fox who had been immersed in the officialdom for decades. People feared him and wanted to get rid of him. Chunabeo, who had been standing proudly at the side and looking at Wei Bai with disdain, suddenly spoke. Your Highness, you said that you wanted me to personally disfigure her. The 5th prince flirtatiously lifted Chun-Abeo's chin with his fan and looked at the makeup on her face. Then, he calmly withdrew his fan. What are you in such a hurry for? Others look better than you. Are you jealous? Wei Bai's appearance was indeed top-notch. Even the 5th prince, a man who soaked in women's flowers, was inevitably moved. Wei Bai finally reacted. Her face was deathly pale as she stood up and silently retreated a few steps. Her entire person was especially pitiful and vigilant. She was like a small animal that had fallen into a trap and didn't know how to break free of this predicament. The fifth prince knew at a glance that Wei Wei Bai was a timid and afraid person. Moreover, he had also looked at the past data. This was a scheming, foolish, and sweet woman who was also proud of herself. Her brain was stupid and useless. Slash, forward slash, forward slash, slash. Chapter 878. This kind of woman was definitely greedy for life and afraid of death. At first, he also doubted why Chi Chimu was moved by this kind of woman. But when he entered and saw her for the first time, he easily knew the reason. Her appearance moved people's hearts. Her pair of clear, watery eyes were enough to move a man's heart. The fifth prince turned the fan in his hand and couldn't help but soften his voice. It's just a cup of poison tea. Coax Chi Chimu to drink it and make me happy. I'll do my best to satisfy whatever you want. At first, he didn't intend to be so gentle. He even prepared a terrifying punishment, intending to force her to agree. But seeing her like this, he couldn't help but be gentle. Wei Wei Bai nervously clutched at her sleeves. I won't kill the fifth prince. That poison is very painful. Your intestines will be twisted into a ball. It's so painful that you can neither beg for life nor die. You wish you had never been born. Madame Bai immediately howled miserably. Wei Wei, listen to Mother. Mother knows you don't like Chi Chimu. Just coax him to drink a cup of tea and save us BA. Wei Wei Bai looked up, tears in her eyes. She looked at them with extreme fear. Bean-sized tears fell, crying so hard that it made one's heart ache. The fifth prince opened his folding fan. For the first time, he felt that bullying people was not refreshing at all. She was such a delicate and soft girl. Could she really poison Chi Chimu, that 1,000-year-old fox, to death? Just as the fifth prince was hesitating whether to let go of Wei Wei Bai, Wei Wei Bai's inaudible reply sounded. I'll do it. Let my mother go BA. These words were really too soft. If not for the fifth prince's good hearing, he would have missed it. She wouldn't lie to him, right? The fifth prince looked up at her and found that she was staring, her tears still falling. He quickly frowned. No matter how he looked at her tears, there was something wrong with her body. The fifth prince immediately waved his fan. All right, quickly go BA. Chunabeo watched as Wei Wei Bai walked out unscathed and said to the fifth prince, Didn't you promise me to disfigure her? That's why I begged my father to support you. The fifth prince was already very irritated, but after hearing her words, he became even more irritated. She's so beautiful. Who would be willing to part with her? Chunabeo. Why are there so many shameless people in this world? Only half of the court examination had passed. A young eunuch calmly threw a slip of paper onto Chi Chimu's table. Chi Chimu watched him warily, not touching the slip of paper. The little eunuch made a hand gesture, which was Wei Wei Bai's name. Chi Chimu's expression changed. He immediately picked up the note and found that Wei Wei Bai had been tied up. He immediately got up and ignored the exam. In a few minutes, the emperor would be here. This was a good opportunity for him to stand out. However, this was nothing compared to a single strand of Wei Wei Bai's hair. His face was dark as he walked out. When the guards outside saw that he was about to charge out, they immediately drew their swords and pointed them at him. During this period of time, Chi Chimu had been bitterly practicing martial arts. With a flip of his hand, he snatched away a knife, not caring that he would be injured as he forced his way out. He snatched a horse and madly galloped out. Wei Wei Bai had been tied up, and he used all his strength to search for her. He soon learned that Wei Wei Bai had been kidnapped by the fifth prince. But the fifth prince had hidden himself deeply, and he couldn't find him for the time being. Chi Chimu was burning with impatience. When he searched late into the night, the third prince's people also met up with him. He still couldn't find her. He knew that the fifth prince had bound Wei Wei Bai for a reason. He could only calm down and return home to wait for the fifth prince's request. But as soon as he stepped into the room, he found that the candles were brightly lit. His footsteps paused, and in the next second, he immediately rushed in. He saw Wei Wei Bai sitting in front of the dressing table, staring blankly at the mirror. She turned back and suddenly revealed a gentle smile to Chi Chimu. Chi Chimu, I cried and ruined my makeup. Help me redo it. Chi Chimu rushed over and pulled her into his arms, his voice choked with sobs. It's good that you're fine. It's good that you're fine. His entire body trembled uncontrollably. Only when he saw her did he realize how much he feared losing her. Full text // download. Chapter 879. Wei Wei Bai hesitated before placing her hand on his back. Then she slowly leaned over and hugged him. She seemed to want to do her best to give him a bit of warmth so that he wouldn't tremble so badly. Her tone was stifled. I'm fine, Chi Chimu. I'm not dead yet. Chi Chimu had experienced all kinds of desperate things, and he could face them calmly. There weren't many times when he felt fear. Most of the time, it was anger and hatred. But when he saw her return tonight, all that was left was the lingering fear and the trembling of surviving a calamity. When she was kidnapped, he actually felt that everything he had done since his rebirth was meaningless. This feeling was so painful that he was a loss. Chi Chimu hugged her even more tightly. He experienced the reassuring feeling of her warm body. Like a child, he could only slowly quell the feeling of helplessness after losing her in her arms. Wei Wei Bai didn't mind his tears wiping her dress. She only hung her head weakly, her long black hair scattered messily across her chest. Her small face was pale and blue. She didn't know what kind of poison that 5-step powder was. It wasn't dawn yet. It began to wrench in pain inside her body. Wei Wei Bai silently endured, swallowing back the blood in her throat. Chi Chimu seemed to feel her unnatural trembling and suddenly raised his head. His eyes were bloodshot and tear-stained. He spoke coldly. Did he treat you rudely? He was the 5th prince. Wei Wei Bai shook her head and said softly, no. Chi Chimu's eyes recovered their clarity and sharpness. He seemed to be afraid that the murderous intent in his eyes would frighten her. He immediately lowered his eyes, but his tone softened. It's good that you didn't. I'll have the doctor come over tomorrow to examine your body. He wasn't reassured that she had been kidnapped and released. He was afraid that the 5th prince's people had done something to her body. Wei Wei Bai frowned as she looked at the mirror. Her long hair was messy and her makeup was ruined. She didn't look good at all. Chi Chimu, draw me another flower. Chi Chimu felt that Wei Wei Bai's state wasn't right. She was still thinking about her makeup at this time. But when he thought about how childish she had always been, he went along with her. He picked up the rouge powder box and fetched some water to help her wash her face. Then, he reapplied makeup on her delicate, snow-white face. She liked the bright makeup, but he knew that under her gorgeous makeup, her plain and elegant face was even more lovable. He was afraid that she would attract more rotten peach blossoms when she went out. He had always been happy to indulge her with more makeup, but today Wei Wei Bai was holding his hand. Her eyes were bright, and there was a faint smile on her face. Why don't you give me some light and elegant makeup? Chi Chimu's hand paused, seemingly somewhat puzzled. Wei Wei Bai was a little embarrassed and said, I know you like my clean and elegant appearance. Chi Chimu's old face reddened. She actually knew that he liked her bare appearance. He felt a little sweet in his heart, and his movements became much gentler. He lightly brushed a thin layer of powder on her face and then pressed the powder with his fingertips. He gently touched her cheek. A faint touch of red. Her bloodless face suddenly brightened up. Her complexion wasn't good. Chi Chimu silently thought that he should have a doctor come over as soon as possible to examine her body. He was afraid that in addition to being unable to bear children, she would also fall ill. Wei Wei Bai saw that she had become neat and beautiful and smiled in satisfaction. She got up and said to Chi Chimu, Am I the most beautiful woman you've ever seen? // Chapter 880. Chi Chimu's eyes were infatuated as he nodded. Yes, no matter how many beautiful women he met in the future, even if she gradually grew old and wrinkles climbed to her eyebrows and eyes, she would still be the most beautiful woman in his eyes. This had nothing to do with appearances. It was just his heart. Wei Wei Bai covered her smile. You really are shameless. I say I'm the most beautiful, and you actually agree. Chi Chimu saw her smile and his heart couldn't help but relax. He was afraid that she had been kidnapped and would feel depressed when she returned. Wei Wei Bai casually walked to the table and poured a cup of tea. The tea that had been spiked had long since turned cold, but she carelessly handed the tea to Chi Chimu with an innocent smile. "Husband, I see that you are tired, so I'll reward you with this tea." Her attitude was so natural, as if she was joking with him. Chi Chimu took the tea and brought it to his nose when he suddenly paused. He looked up at her, a trace of grief flashing through his eyes. The room was filled with the fragrance of orchids. There was also a faint, almost unpleasant aroma in her tea that he would never forget even if he were to die. It made him return to his previous life. At that time, she had lowered her head and timidly handed over the tea. He thought he had already won and didn't think much about it, but he fell for her just like that. In this life, he used up all his thoughts and schemes to scheme against everyone. Only towards her, he lost his initial desire for revenge. Instead, he indulged her more and more. In exchange, it was still the same cup of poisoned tea. Chi Chimu's fingers trembled. His voice was somewhat hoarse and trembling. "Wei Wei, do you want me to drink it?" Wei Wei Bai stood by the table, staring at him blankly, the smile at the corner of her mouth stiff. The flower between her brows was so delicate. He had personally drawn it. Chi Chimu said heavily, word by word, "Do you want me to drink it?" Wei Wei Bai's body swayed, her fingers propping up the table. The naive arrogance in her expression finally disappeared. His heart was filled with fear. She clutched her sleeves tightly. She was so nervous that she looked at him helplessly. He couldn't say a single word. It was as if she was the one who was going to drink the poison. Not like him. She even gave him a pleading look. She seemed to be asking him not to force her. This expression made Chi Chima's heart ache. His Wei Wei also knew how to use him to seduce a man to die for her. Chi Chimu sneered, his laughter low and somewhat mournful. She was really born to be his nemesis. In this life, no one could stop him from climbing up. Only she, this heartless little bastard, with a simple, helpless expression, completely defeated him. As Chi Chimu smiled, his expression turned indifferent, seemingly powerless. He looked at her tiredly and suddenly did not want to force her. "You're the one who brought it to me, so of course I have to drink it. How can I waste your good intentions?" Chi Chimu raised the teacup to his mouth, his lips curling into a light smile. Sure enough, he shouldn't have spoiled her. Wei Wei Bai, who couldn't be raised properly, had to be personally tied up and watched over by him. The tea that Chi Chimu brought to his mouth had not yet touched his lips. He wanted to collapse. He wasn't a fool. If he died, she would be able to freely live her good life. No, she was so stupid and brainless. Without his protection, it was impossible for her to live well. Sure enough, it was better for him to live. Otherwise, who would still love this vicious, selfish, and useless little heartless person who would only drag others down? To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 881. Chi Chimu thought of this and was just about to throw away the teacup. A fair and slender hand suddenly swung over. The teacup in his hand was thrown out. Chi Chimu's hand was empty, but he still maintained the action of holding the teacup. Her movements were too fast, so Chi Chimu's brain couldn't react. He could only stare foolishly at her. Wei Wei Bai waited for the system to announce the completion of the side mission before immediately knocking away the teacup in Chi Chimu's hand. After all, if she killed the target, her main mission had to be completed as well. When she handed Chi Chimu the poisoned tea, she had already calculated that no matter how deranged the main system was, it wouldn't use the main mission as a joke. Sure enough, when she handed over the tea, the countdown to the completion of the side mission began. As long as Chi Chimu held the teacup for more than 2 minutes, regardless of whether he drank it or not, it would count as completing the mission. And she deliberately used the poison that had killed Chi Chimu in her previous life. Because Chi Chimu had died once, he must have studied this kind of poison and had a particularly deep impression of it. As long as she gave him this cup of poisoned tea, he would be able to smell that something was wrong. Then he definitely wouldn't drink it and would even hold the teacup to stall for time, interrogating her as to why she poisoned him. 2 minutes passed with this question. Then she hugged his thigh and begged for forgiveness, relying on her 99 love value. Chichima's attitude was, of course. What else could he do? Of course it was to forgive her. But she didn't think that Chichima's brain was full of holes. He clearly knew that the tea was poisoned. He even wanted to put it into his mouth. Fortunately, he also hesitated for a while. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to hold out for 2 minutes. After 2 minutes passed, she knocked away the teacup in his hand and let out a sigh of relief. Chichimu stared blankly at her for a moment before returning to his senses to look at the shattered teacup on the ground. Wei Wei Bai clenched her fists, her hands red from hitting the teacup too hard. Her face was deathly pale, and even the light red rouge couldn't hide her unsightly complexion. As if she had just woken up from a dream, she moved her lips and cried in fear, "Don't drink it. I poisoned it. Don't drink it." Chichimu staggered a few steps, looking at her in disbelief. He had originally thought that he had reached the deepest level of hell and would never be able to climb out. Her words pulled him back to the human world, where there was light everywhere. Chichimu saw the fear in her eyes and knew that she had been frightened. He didn't care that she wanted to poison him. He only knew that she was scared. He couldn't bear to see her so scared. He hurriedly stepped forward, but Wei Wei Bai hurriedly took a few steps back. Her tears fell. "I didn't do it on purpose. They captured my mother, and a lot of people have threatened me. They even threatened me." Chichimu's long arm reached out, directly pulling her into his embrace. He hugged her tightly, and at the same time, he held the hand that she used to push the teacup away. Looking at it, her soft and boneless palm, as expected, had turned red. She was in too much of a hurry. She was indeed the one who was hurt when she clashed head-on with the teacup. The darkness and distortion in Chichimu's eyes were gone, leaving only tender pity. "Does it hurt?" Wei Wei Bai's face was deathly pale as she looked at him in confusion, seemingly unable to understand what he was doing. Chichimu patiently asked again, "Does it hurt?" Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips, the rims of her eyes red. She finally nodded, aggrieved. "It hurts. Chichimu, I'm in so much pain." She really was in pain. The system wanted to relieve the pain, but she refused, because this plane had used up too much life points. Slash. Slash. The Chapter 882. She couldn't bear to spend anymore. She just had to endure the pain. What kind of pain hadn't she endured before? So right now, she felt as if her internal organs were overturning rivers and seas. Chichimu said with heartache, "I'll go find some medicine for you to apply. It'll be fine soon." Wei Wei Bai laid in his arms, looking at the sun peeking through the window. Her mind blurred, knowing that this body of hers was done for. There was still one last point of favorability. She suddenly reached out and grabbed his clothes, her voice weak, her breath gradually drifting away. "Chichimu, will you still like another woman?" Chichimu frowned, suddenly feeling that something was wrong. Why was her body so cold? "No, just you will torment me to death. I don't have time to like others." He spoke the truth, but his hand couldn't help stroking her forehead. Did she catch a cold? Wei Wei Bai was powerless to stop him, only smiling weakly. "But I can't torment you. How about you like me in the next life?" Chichimu's hand touched her face, so cold that it made his hand tremble. His breathing paused, finally realizing what was wrong with her. Large beads of sweat broke out on Wei Wei Bai's forehead. She seemed to want to laugh, but a mouthful of blood overflowed from the corner of her mouth. She was in so much pain that her whole body trembled, her bright eyes covered with a layer of gray gauze. "I know I'm bad and selfish. They gave me poison and said that if you didn't die, I would die. I'm afraid of death. I'm afraid of death." Chichimu's face was completely white. He couldn't care about anything else, immediately carrying her and rushing out. "Wei Wei, I'll call an imperial physician for you. It won't hurt anymore." His voice trembled, his legs almost weak as he ran out. Wei Wei Bai leaned into his arms, absent-mindedly saying, "I poisoned you. Do you hate me to death? Don't hate, I don't hate. Chi Chimu repeatedly roared. He had long been unable to hate her. He didn't have enough time to love her, so how could he hate her? Bai Weiwei revealed a smile, but she pressed it back down in grievance. Chi Chimu, I'm dying of pain. Chi Chimu forced a smile and comforted her. It'll be fine after seeing a doctor. Don't be afraid. Is that so? Her voice weakened. Chi Chimu's breathing quickened, almost crying out loud. Yes, when have I ever lied to you? Weiwei Bai's body became lighter. She didn't even feel any pain. She couldn't help but smile. You lied to me so many times. Chi Chimu immediately said, I won't lie to you even once in the future. Weiwei Bai said coquettishly, Really? Chi Chimu, really? I won't lie to you even if I deceive the heavens and deceive the earth. Weiwei Bai said, Then you should live well. I don't want you to be lonely and sick all your life. I want you to live happily. Chi Chimu's eyes were red as he rushed forward. He couldn't think, only knowing how to respond. All right, I'll promise you anything. Weiwei Bai endured the pain while leaning against his chest in satisfaction. She dizzily uttered her last words. Chi Chimu, love me a little more, okay? Okay. Ding. The male lead's favorability has increased to 100. The host's body has suffered great destruction and is in danger of death. Immediately leave this plane. Countdown to leaving this plane, 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Successful departure. Chi Chimu's footsteps suddenly stopped. He stood on the bustling street with Weiwei Bai in his arms, momentarily forgetting the direction of the imperial palace. He wanted to take Weiwei to the third prince's place to borrow an imperial physician. He heard that the imperial physician was very powerful. As long as the person had a single breath, he could save them. But he had actually forgotten which direction he was going to go. Weiwei, do you remember the way? Chi Chimu held the ice-cold Weiwei Bai and asked foolishly. I forgot. She was clearly in great pain, but he had forgotten where to find a physician for her. Wasn't he really useless? // to facilitate your next reading, you can click on the Chapter 883. Host has completed the mission and gained 30 days of life points. Receive an additional side mission's sympathy reward of 20 days of life points, a total of 560 days. Deducting 1 life subsistence allowance for 5 days, 5 days for the Flower As Jade sticker, 5 days for the system instant noodles, 5 days for the popcorn, 10 days for the painkiller. 130 life stickers, specially approved to receive the main system's wholesale price, 50 days of life points. Remaining 480 days of life points. External life points can be accommodated for 800 days. Weiwei Bai was startled awake by the deduction of life points. She knew that there were many stickers used, but she hadn't thought of so many. The first time she used stickers in the previous plane, 3 stickers cost 15 days. If she hadn't received the wholesale price, her 1 year of life points wouldn't have been enough to deduct the number of bedtimes in Chi Chimu's plane. Sure enough, to live, she had to stay away from the bed. How much life points had she spent in a year and a half's time? If she hadn't had Yi Yuxuan, she would have died long ago. The system said happily, wholesale price, the first time I've seen the wholesale price. I heard that only when the quantity is large enough can there be a wholesale price. Next time, fight again and see if you can get a few more wholesale prices. After all, the wholesale price was discounted. It was cheaper than the supermarket cleaning up expired food. Weiwei Bai's face turned white. There was still next time? The next time the target dared to pull her into bed, she would strangle them to death. 50 days of life points, even if it was the wholesale price, it was so expensive that her heart twitched. She couldn't take it anymore. She had to look at Yi Yuxuan. She had to look at his shiny face. Her wounded heart would heal. Was there any host as miserable as her? Life or death. In the end, she had to pay the life points. Was it easy for her to live? Weiwei Bai got up from the bed and suddenly felt that something was wrong. Walala. She raised her hand and saw a thin silver chain around her wrist. Her wrist was white, and the light blue blood vessels were visible. The delicate silver chain was even more conspicuous. Wei Wei Bai was speechless for a moment and silently lay back down. Hey, system smash, am I still in the realm? She clearly saw herself lying on the bed in her own room. Why was he imprisoned? This was completely illogical. He must still be dreaming. It was better to continue sleeping. The system said, "Wake up. Yi Yuxuan is still grieving over at the balcony. Her health points are calling for you." Wei Wei Bai asked, "Where's my dad?" With her father around, it was impossible for him to chain her up. The system said, "The male lead sent him to America to find a doctor." Wei Wei Bai, "Where is Qin Xiu?" The system said, "He followed your father to find a doctor." Wei Wei Bai frowned. "Did something terrible happen to my body? So you want to lock me up and let everyone go to the doctor?" The system said, "No, it's just that the male lead wants to have you all to himself. That's why he found a reason to send your doctor and your old father away. Then, he chained you, who wouldn't resist, to appease his restless heart." Wei Wei Bai said, "I'll sleep for 3 days. 3 days ago, weren't we still sweetly watching a movie?" Yi Yuxuan's 3 days and her 1.5 years. Why did it feel like they were not in the same dimension? She was the one who had experienced more things, but she realized that the speed of Yi Yuxuan's schizophrenia was not something she could catch up to. The system really did not know how to smooth things over. Yi Yuxuan was getting more and more affected by the plane. It was worried that Yi Yuxuan would not be able to take it and directly cause schizophrenia. Chapter 884. Fortunately, Yi Yuxuan, who represented reason and reality, was strong enough. Otherwise, it wouldn't be enough to be abused by Wei Wei Bai. Yi Yuxuan heard the sound of the chain, and his heart couldn't help but throb with pain. He didn't turn around, but stood quietly on the balcony, a cigarette in his hand. His eyes sometimes twisted with struggle, sometimes sober and rational. More than that, it was a crazy obsession. He knew that something was wrong with him. Moreover, his originally calm temperament was gradually sliding into a huge vortex that he couldn't control. That black hole was the sense of insecurity of losing Wei Wei Bai. Now that he was away from Wei Wei Bai for a few seconds, he wished he could tie her up, for fear that if he looked away, she would be gone. It wasn't normal. He had already used all his strength to suppress and analyze his feelings. But for the first time, he felt powerless. He saw the ash fall to the ground, and his head suddenly hurt. His body trembled as he supported himself on the edge of the balcony. The scene in the dream was like a viscous vortex, constantly spinning and pulling him in. It pulled him completely into the dream, the most painful scene after losing her. Reborn young master's delicate cousin follow-up. Everyone in the Bai family trembled. The bluestone road outside the door was stained with the blood of the Bai family. Madame Bai trembled as she brought over the tea, saying in a low voice, "Chi Darren, please have some tea." Chi Chimu silently looked at the white orchids outside the window. This was Wei Wei Bai's boudoir. After her death, this room was sealed up by Madame Bai. Madame Bai and the 5th prince were in cahoots. Before the 3rd prince ascended the throne, she had secretly contacted the 5th prince. Even when Wei Wei Bai ate the 5-step powder, the 5th prince used all his family members to threaten Wei Wei Bai to kill him. It was also Madame Bai's own plan, just to surrender to the 5th prince. Chi Chimu unhurriedly took the tea, his movements neither fast nor slow as he used the lid to scrape the foam from the tea. The poison had been switched. After all, Wei Wei Bai's orchid fragrance was so special. There was no one else in the world who was the same. Thinking of this, his expression became absent-minded for a moment, and his heart began to ache. To alleviate this pain, he said faintly, "Pull one more and kill it." 2 soldiers appeared and immediately pulled one of the Bai clansmen out. "Sister, save me. Save me. I don't want to die." The one who was dragged out was Madame Bai's younger brother. Madame Bai trembled and her legs almost gave out. She immediately sat on the ground. She implored Chi Chimu, "In the past, I was blind and blinded to treat you like that. Moreover, I also didn't know that the 5th prince would be so cruel. He told me that he wouldn't take Wei Wei's life, so I helped him deceive Wei Wei. But he didn't expect the 5th prince to poison him. He never thought that Wei Wei Bai would rather die than poison Chi Chimu. If he had let her return that day and poison Chi Chimu to death, she would be able to rush back immediately and get the antidote. But when the sun came up, she didn't see her daughter come back. At that time, she felt uneasy. Only when she returned did she find out that Wei Wei Bai had died. Chi Chimu locked himself up for a day before emerging with Wei Wei Bai's corpse in his arms. Then he held a funeral for Wei Wei Bai, as usual, insisting on burying Wei Wei Bai in the Chi family's graveyard. Madame Bai didn't dare to say anything because of her guilty conscience. But everything that happened next caused the entire situation to spiral out of control. The old emperor died, and the third prince inherited the throne. The fifth prince and the crown prince were imprisoned. All the losers who were involved in this battle were dead. Download the mobile article at https://m.sashu.com. Chapter 885. Even the fifth prince died in less than half a month in the Forbidden Land. It was said that he died very miserably, as if he was tortured to death. Madame Bai worried day and night, but in the end, she couldn't escape. Early this morning, Chi Chimu led people to surround the entire Bai family. Then he killed a person every once in a while. Without giving any reason, he directly started killing. This kind of pressure caused many people to directly collapse. Chi Chimu didn't pay too much attention to Madame Bai, who was paralyzed on the ground and begging for mercy. His expression was cold, his eyes empty. When he swept his gaze over the dressing table, there was a hint of a smile at the corners of his mouth. There seemed to be a girl with a thin back, long hair hanging to her waist, and a sleepy face sitting there. She seemed to be holding powder to apply it to herself, but couldn't do it properly. She could only throw away the powder and willfully and arrogantly order the people around her. Chi Chimu, what are you still looking at? I like the flowers you drew. Why aren't you coming over to draw for me? Chi Chimu stared blankly at her, his smile unconsciously deepening. But his eyes were tired and miserable. Madame Bai saw him smile, and her mind suddenly flashed with inspiration. Sir Chi, I am sorry, but on account of me being Wei Wei's mother, please spare our lives. Don't you like Wei Wei so much? Chi Chimu's empty and drifting eyes finally had some substance. He lowered his eyes, looking at her without any emotion. Then he gently nodded and said with a sigh, You also know that I like her. It's a pity that she is no longer here. When she was here, he even had thoughts of giving up on dealing with the Bai family, this malignant tumor. Unfortunately, Wei Wei Bai was no longer here. Madame Bai repeatedly said, But this is still Wei Wei's home. Before she could finish, the poison tea in Chi Chimu's hand was quietly poured over her head. Madame Bai was startled, then suddenly screamed and immediately dug out the antidote from her clothes. This kind of medicine was colorless and tasteless. She had obtained it from the dead fifth prince. Even if one touched their skin, they would be poisoned to death. She had long thrown caution to the wind, knowing that Chi Chimu wouldn't let her family go. So she first showed weakness and then coaxed Chi Chimu to drink the tea. Once Chi Chimu died, they would flee to the neighboring country and have a slim chance of survival. But she didn't expect that Chi Chimu would directly pour the tea over her head. Madame Bai took out the antidote and was about to put it into her mouth. A foot ruthlessly stomped down, precisely landing on Madame Bai's hand. He crushed her hand and the antidote under his feet. The sound of bones breaking could be heard. It sent chills down one's spine. Madame Bai screamed. Chi Chimu watched expressionlessly as he threw the teacup at Madame Bai. Then he stood up and kicked Madame Bai away. The poison in Madame Bai's body had already taken effect. The poison was highly toxic, and her skin began to fester. It looked terrifying and mournful. Chi Chimu's heart was unperturbed. He originally thought that revenge would make him feel better, but he was still dispirited. Chi Chimu said in a tired and bored voice, Kill them all, then throw the corpses into the mass grave to feed the dogs. As for the Bai family, burn it. Nothing here was good enough for Wei Wei Bai, even if it was the place where she lived. He wasn't willing to sully his wife in this place. After Chi Chimu walked out of the Bai family, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. He clutched at his chest in heart-rending pain. His eyes were about to burst as he gasped for breath. Chichimu powerlessly opened his mouth, as though he was howling in pain. His legs trembled as he walked, and his tears fell along with him. Chapter 886. This was the first time he cried after Wei Wei Bai was buried. He didn't even know how he had endured so many days. Every day, when he woke up, he didn't dare to open his eyes. The empty pillow made him incomparably suffocate. He had clearly lived very well in his previous life. No matter how lonely a person was, no matter how many hardships he had experienced, it had never hurt to the point of despair. In this life, everything had clearly gone smoothly. The third prince had ascended the throne ahead of time. He had rushed out of the court examination ahead of time and was made the top scorer by the imperial brush. The chief family's wealth hadn't been touched. In the future, his official career would be smooth, and no one would be able to stop him from having a bright future. He should even ride a horse now and parade through the streets to admire the flowers with a group of grand scholars who had passed the court examination. His life should have been so good. It was just missing a Wei Wei Bai. It was just missing her. Why couldn't it work? Chichimu thought he could hold on. After all, he had passed through all kinds of desperate situations, even the impossible of rebirth. What reason did he have to not hold on and live a good life? Even before she died, she wanted him to live a good life. He had agreed. But why couldn't it work? Chichimu gritted his teeth and endured, tears streaming down his face. He had lied to her. He couldn't live happily at all. He didn't even have a heart. How could he be happy? Another winter, Chichimu resigned from his position in the court. 3 years of brilliant official career. He had only wanted to give her a title. He was plagued by illness. The imperial physician told him that his heart was ill to the bone and he was overly worried. If he couldn't resolve himself, he wouldn't have long to live. A serious illness in the early spring completely destroyed his body. He estimated that he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Chichimu coughed, weakly burning paper money for Wei Wei Bai. He said gently, "This life, I estimate that it will be like this. I won't live for many years, and I won't be happy for many days." Speaking to this point, he finally revealed a sincere smile. This is also good. Suicide is too cowardly, and living is too hard. It's not bad to die earlier. Chichimu's face was deathly pale, but his smile remained. Someone as impatient as you might have already reincarnated. I don't know if I'll be able to catch up to your next life. I'm afraid I'll be reborn again. After his rebirth, everything began anew. But after her rebirth, she might not be the same as she was in this life. He was afraid that he wouldn't meet her. Chichimu sighed. Meeting you is truly a sin. I don't know what I owe you, this little heartless one. You made me suffer. He should have been filled with glory and splendor, a life of wealth. She had brought him a life of loneliness and suffering. However, he still felt happy. There was nothing he could do about it. Everything she gave him was good. Even if it was lovesickness that seeped into one's bones, or if it was a life-threatening illness, it was fine. Even after she died, he was still willing to pamper and miss her. As a person of 2 lifetimes, he couldn't compare to her 1 year of companionship. Chichimu coughed up blood and said with a smile, Wei Wei, I also hurt very much. The wind and snow gradually grew heavier, and Chichimu sat through the night. After he returned, his body completely collapsed. He endured for 3 days and missed her for the rest of his life. Then he died. He promised her to live a good life, but he lied to her. He had to hurry to the underworld to find her and apologize. When the time came, he would allow her to beat and scold him or kneel on the abacus. He only asked to be able to wash her feet again or draw a flower between her brows for her, if she still didn't forgive him. He would tie himself up again and let her do as she pleased. She was a bit selfish, but her heart was soft. No matter how low he was, as low as the dust, she would always love him. /the Chapter 887. Wei Wei Bai couldn't take it anymore. Her voice trembled as she said, Are you okay? I'm fine. I just want to kiss you. Yi Yuxuan's tone was calm, but his voice was hoarse and magnetic. It pulled at her eardrums and made her ears itch. And his words made Wei Wei Bai, who had always been thick-skinned, feel a little shy. She coughed lightly. Unchain me, and I'll let you kiss me as much as you want. Yi Yuxuan looked at her armed expression, and a sharp sense of danger flashed in his eyes. No, let's just lock it up. You have too many motives. I'm a little scared. Scared? If someone else said that they were scared, Wei Wei Bai might sympathize and give him a thumbs up. But Yi Yuxuan said that he was scared. This was a big problem. Yi Yuxuan was perennially paralyzed with constipation and an unbreakable heart of stone. He was scared too? Wei Wei Bai carefully shifted her body, and her smile was a little stiff. Yi Yuxuan, you have to know that my feelings for you are very pure. Don't think too much. I just want to cheat you of your life points. She didn't dare to ask for anything else. Yi Yuxuan pursed his lips slightly and revealed an expression that was like a smile, yet not a smile. This expression was rare. To be exact, it was rare for any expression to appear on his face. He put his fingers on the chain on her wrist. He touched her blood vessels and then said softly, "You are indeed very pure to me, but you don't have any feelings for me." This sentence caused a ripple. It made Wei Wei Bai's mind clear up for a moment. For a second, her expression almost changed. She felt that Yi Yuxuan was much more superior than her. She calmed down. This guy was so hard to fool. It was useless to say that she liked him. Yi Yuxuan lowered her head and felt the blood vessels on her wrist. Your pulse isn't fast. Even if it's occasionally rapid, it's because you're nervous and guilty. Even your heartbeat has nothing to do with emotional fluctuations. It's just a biological instinct. He had trained before, and it was a very standard elite training method. He knew much more about the human body than she did. He could even see their micro-expressions clearly. Every time she lied, there would be a moment where she had to pretend. Wei Wei Bai couldn't pretend anymore. No matter how good her acting was, she couldn't control her heartbeat and pulse. Unless, of course, Slagstem was using cheats. Thinking of this, Wei Wei Bai tried to call the system. Give me an idiot hack and make Yi Yuxuan's IQ drop by 100. How am I going to let him see if my pulse and heartbeat are fast? The system glanced at Yi Yuxuan in fear. It shivered and poked its head out from behind the trash can. His aura is similar to yours. Mental retardation cheats usually attack indiscriminately. Once the mental retardation cheat is activated, you'll also lose 100 points. Moreover, it didn't dare to use the cheat in front of Yi Yuxuan. Yi Yuxuan seemed to be a little bit awakened. It didn't dare to imagine how miserable its fate would be when Yi Yuxuan fully awakens. It didn't even dare to speak now. How could it use the cheat? Wei Wei Bai said, "Trash system, what's the use of having you?" System said, "Trash host, if you have the ability to rely on the system, why don't you have the ability to do it yourself and use the cheat?" To be honest, even if Yi Yuxuan's IQ drops by 100, he'll still be higher than you. The favored son of heaven was a Jack Su super halo that would destroy the heavens and destroy the earth. It could mess with anyone, but it couldn't mess with Yi Yuxuan. Wei Wei Bai thought, "System, this trash, spit out what you ate and return what you used." We're done. She was just about to curse that trash system. Her chin was lifted by someone, and Yi Yuxuan kissed her lightly. Chapter 888. Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes fluttered, and her breathing became erratic. After he exposed her disguise, she could not be as calm as before. Yi Yuxuan said, "Don't worry, there's no point in lying to me. I'm naturally sensitive to other people's emotions." Because he was not a normal person, he was completely lacking in emotions. So to know what others were thinking, he observed other people's expressions since he was young to guess what they were thinking. So he knew even if she lied to him. Wei Wei Bai looked at him calmly. In fact, her heart was in a mess. This kind of atmosphere was similar to when a real big shot came and smacked her to the ground with a fly swatter when she was about to fly high in the sky. She suddenly said, "Yes, Yi Yuxuan, I don't like you. Even if you're handsome, rich, and an old virgin, I still don't like you." These words were heartbreaking. The system notification said, This sentence increased by 30 days. Emotional fluctuations, even if it was uncomfortable, could increase one's lifespan. Yi Yuxuan was undoubtedly uncomfortable, but his expression was still paralyzed and did not change much. Then he kissed her gently. After the kiss, he said, "I'm in a bit of pain here. Give me a kiss to calm me down." Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched. She knew that Yi Yuxuan was not the kind of guy who could be fooled. She suddenly said to the system, "When he kissed me, did my lifespan increase?" The system said no. As expected, he knew that she was lying to him. So Yi Yuxuan started to restrain his emotional fluctuations towards her. She could still gain lifespan now, but one day, Yi Yuxuan would be tired of this kind of deceitful relationship. At that time, he might completely shut off his emotional channel towards her. Wei Wei Bai struggled in her heart. She breathed heavily. There was no emotional shield in reality, and her current state was not suitable for liking anyone. But she was going to lose her life. Feelings were not that important. Wei Wei Bai bit her lip, her fingers clenched, and suddenly she reached out to pinch Yi Yuxuan's face. She no longer pretended to be angry and directly exposed her fangs. "Yi Yuxuan, listen to me, you old virgin with a facial nerve disorder. I've hated you since the beginning." Yi Yuxuan stared blankly for a moment before she vaguely nodded. It was as if he already knew about it. Bai Weiwei wasn't polite with him. Her fingers exerted force and pinched his face red. "Look at you. You put on an icy face every day. Who are you trying to scare? I have a weak heart, do you know that?" Yi Yuxuan's face was pinched by her, and he looked somewhat comically calm. A trace of hesitation flashed through his eyes. "Did I scare you?" Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth. "Nonsense. Do you remember the first time I took the initiative to look for you? At that time, I sat in the reception room of your company for an entire day. You were having a good time in the meeting and ignored me for an entire day. When you were done with the meeting, you walked out directly and didn't even look at me." Her father's company was a little small. It couldn't be compared to a giant like the Yi family. She heard that her photo had been chosen by Yi Yuxuan. Her father was overjoyed. She was also curious about her fiancé's personality. She wanted to get along with him first, so she called to make an appointment to see him. And the result? This bastard had a cold face, as if he didn't know her. What kind of person was she? A true blue princess with princess syndrome, a vain ghost, and a super fairy. Yi Yuxuan, this expressionless person with eyes that grew to the ceiling. His attitude was enough to make her bear a grudge. Who wasn't a little princess or a little prince? Why did he dislike her so much? If he disliked her, then so be it. Let's just dislike each other. Address of the full text: https://www.sashu.com//. Download of the full text: https://www.sashu.com//. Chapter 889. Yi Yuxuan tried to recall, and the image of her at that time appeared in his mind. She was sitting obediently on the blue sofa in the living room. She was wearing a white dress with air bangs. Her long hair reached her waist, and there was a pearl hair clip in her hair. She looked like a little lady. When he walked over, he only glanced at her lightly. He actually remembered it so clearly. Yi Yuxuan recalled and said, "You didn't have much of a presence at that time. I forgot who you were." He had completely forgotten that he had a fiancée. So when she appeared, he automatically treated her as an insignificant person. Wei Wei Bai. Could this answer be more heartless? Wei Wei Bai let go of his face. She twisted her fingers and took a few deep breaths before saying, "After that, you treated me like air every time. Like how I like you. Tui, I like ghosts more than you." Falling in love with the iceberg CEO was a plot. Novels were ridiculous, let alone reality. Who would have the patience to live with an iceberg face? Yi Yuxuan lowered his thick eyelashes. Although his expression was indifferent, he didn't know why he felt a little sad. He pursed his lips and said softly, "I still treat you like air now." Wei Wei Bai was about to frown, but she heard his deep and gentle voice. "I'm everywhere. Without you, I would suffocate. It was a serious and sincere sentence. It should have been mushy, but it was incomparably sincere. Wei Wei Bai suddenly felt that she couldn't even win against a stoic face when it came to romantic words. This world really made people feel hopeless. Wei Wei Bai's heart actually beat a few beats faster. She couldn't help but touch her chest. Fortunately, she didn't have a heart attack. Wei Wei Bai knew that at this point, she might as well just smash the pot. Anyway, he wouldn't believe her even if she giggled and said that she loved him. She might as well just say it. Anyway, she was full of resentment towards him. Tell me, what did your fiancé do to me? You didn't care when my family was in trouble, and you didn't ask when I was sick. People know that I have a fiancé and wanting to call you to come out and take a look, but I don't even have your number. How embarrassing. Speaking of which, Wei Wei Bai suddenly felt a little sad. At first, she also thought that since she had a rich fiancé, her life should be more romantic. She had been foolish and sweet before. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been fooled by her scumbag sister for so long. In the end, you didn't give me flowers, you didn't take me to a yacht, you didn't know my birthday, you weren't by my side when I was sad, you didn't understand my despair at all. As Wei Wei Bai spoke, she suddenly felt sure enough, aside from Yi Yuxuan's HP. There was nothing special about her. He was completely useless. Even if she wanted a asterisk, it would be better than this stinky man. Bai Weiwei raised her eyes and said sincerely, Yi Yuxuan, you tell me, is what you did a human being? You said that I lied to you, but you either ignored me or locked me up and treated me as your possession. She shook the chains. How do you want me to like you? These words were so heavy that it could pierce through his heart. Yi Yuxuan had never heard such a heartfelt truth. She had always lied to him, coaxed him, and sweet-talked him, even passionate as fire. He looked at her blankly. His usually calm mind was completely messed up. Wei Wei Bai heard the system notification. My HP has increased by another 100 days. Even the system was astonished by this crazy increase. Why did you suddenly provoke him so much? Wei Wei Bai said to the system calmly. I can't lie to Yi Yuxuan. If I want to live, then I can't shamelessly continue to attack him with false feelings. The system said, then what are you going to do? Wei Wei Bai, let's exchange feelings for feelings. Since he couldn't fool him, he might as well reveal his true emotions. Indeed, she did not like him that much. Even if it did throb, it wasn't true love. Suddenly, the chains on her wrists were undone. Wei Wei Bai looked at him in confusion. However, she discovered that Yi Yuxuan had lowered his head and gently kissed her wrist. Then, he raised his head, and for the first time, a helpless look of affection appeared in his eyes. Then tell me, what do I have to do to make you like me? He paused and said, I'll change them all. I'll change the ones you don't like. Wei Wei Bai. Transmigration system, Adonis, come here. /transmigration system, Adonis, come here. // transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Download transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Mobile transmigration system, Adonis, come here, comma. Chapter 890. Wei Wei Bai took a deep breath and said to the system, Yi Yuxuan seems to have been transmigrated. This isn't him. The ice-cold man turned into a helpless and pitiful puppy. The difference was so big that the earth flipped several times. The system said, this is him. Love changes people. You have to believe that your charm is enough to bring the dead back to life. Erectile dysfunction will turn into shikijiru, and the Antarctic face will turn into an equatorial face. Wei Wei Bai was speechless. What a magical equatorial face. What kind of weird description was that? She looked up at him carefully and found that Yi Yuxuan's face had softened a lot. Although his expression was still paralyzed, at least it was more pleasing to the eye. It was not the equatorial face, but the Antarctic face was a few degrees warmer. Wei Wei Bai tried to say, Yi Yuxuan, why do you like me so much all of a sudden? Yi Yuxuan was silent for a while before saying, you're the person in my dreams. The person in my dreams. Wei Wei Bai was confused for a while. Did he mean that she was the person in his dreams? Yi Yuxuan's voice was magnetic, and now that he lowered his voice and softened it, It was even more irresistible. I've never had any emotional fluctuations. I've never experienced happiness, anger, sorrow, or joy. But you brought me all kinds of emotions that I can't believe. When I see you, I think you're beautiful. My heart beats faster and dopamine secretes crazily. My physiological reaction makes me unable to control myself. It was like fate, ever since he started to enter the dream world. She was the one who brought him all his happiness and sorrow. When he saw her in reality, he was often in a state of despair, but was saved by her. This feeling was too painful, but it was too wonderful. Wei Wei Bai could not understand Yi Yuxuan's feelings. She tried to say, "Then when did you start to have feelings for me?" She had been his fiancée for so long, but he really did not have any reaction to her. When did he start to chase after her? Wei Wei Bai began to recall. The system suddenly interrupted. The plane is ready. In 10 minutes, we will forcibly transmigrate. Wei Wei Bai's contemplation was interrupted. Why so sudden? Don't I have many days of HP? The system said, 800 days are up, but something unexpected happened. This time, the plane passage is not stable. We must enter as soon as possible, or else the passage may collapse. Wei Wei Bai, why didn't this happen before? The system said coldly, 9 more minutes. Wei Wei Bai really wanted to slap the system. Yi Yuxuan saw that her expression was natural. He lowered his eyes. The first time you made my heart throb was, however, Wei Wei Bai felt that her ears were ringing and her head was heavy. She frowned and couldn't hear Yi Yuxuan's words clearly. By the time he felt better, Yi Yuxuan had finished speaking. So, when exactly did he start to have feelings for her? She did not hear him at all. Do you want to ask again? Trash fried system. It's been 7 minutes, 6 minutes. What could he do in such a short time? Yi Yuxuan was so generous with her HP. Wei Wei Bai always felt that if she did not give him some benefits, she would be a bit of a scumbag. She suddenly said, "Okay, I know I'm your emotional provider. If you meet other women in the future, they can also stir up your emotions. Are you going to run away with them?" Yi Yuxuan, no. His eyes were extremely deep and his tone was firm. There are no other women, men, children, old people, animals, crossover system. Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www. Sashu. com//crossover system. Adonis, come here and txt download at https://www. Sashu. crossover system. Adonis, come here and read it on crossover system. Adonis, come here. Chapter 891. Wei Wei Bai. How could someone say something so funny in such a serious manner? She said, "All right, I believe you. Come on, turn around." Yi Yuxuan looked at her hesitantly, as though he was afraid that she would disappear if he turned around. Wei Wei Bai stretched out her leg and kicked him lightly. She said capriciously, "Hurry up. How can you be my fiancé? Why are you so disobedient?" Yi Yuxuan shifted his body and turned around. Then he suddenly felt a weight on his back. Wei Wei Bai was lying on his back. "Fiancé, carry me." Yi Yuxuan's posture stiffened. He felt her soft body rubbing against the back of his hand. He stretched out his hands and carried her on his back. Wei Wei Bai laid on his back lazily, as though she had no bones. "Let's go to the bathroom. I want to take a shower." Yi Yuxuan took half a step forward and stopped. "Us?" Wei Wei Bai's voice was soft. She purposely pressed against his ear like a seductive demoness. Hurry up." Yi Yuxuan, he grunted, then took a step forward with his long legs. He walked quickly to the bathroom door and gave it a hard kick. The door slammed open and hit the wall. This strength could kill. Wei Wei Bai looked at Yi Yuxuan's ferocious actions and suddenly wondered if she had gone overboard with her flirting. She was going to turn him into a beast. After entering the bathroom, she got off his back with some effort. Then she said to Yi Yuxuan, "Why aren't you turning on the water?" Yi Yuxuan blinked, clearly a little dazed. Perhaps it was the first time someone had ordered him around like this. He was a little surprised and curious. If someone else had spoken to him like this, he would have ignored them. But this person was Wei Wei Bai. He actually felt a wave of joy in his heart, because from a moment she said that she hated him. All her expressions and actions were real. This gave his uneasy heart a little bit of peace. At least she wasn't lying to him. Yi Yuxuan rolled up his sleeves and personally tested the temperature of the water for her. His fingers touched the warm water and moved gently. His movements were elegant and nimble. He had already tested the best temperature for her. Suddenly, he was stunned. The sound of clothes falling to the ground came from behind him. The steam was rising in the bathroom. Yi Yuxuan turned around and saw Bai Weiwei take off her pajamas as if nothing had happened. The clothes slipped down to her delicate white ankles. Her body was graceful and slender, and her skin was as delicate as jade. Bai Weiwei reached out and tucked her thick long hair behind her back. Her movements were natural and generous. It was as if Yi Yuxuan was just a decoration. His burning gaze couldn't affect her at all. Yi Yuxuan's hands were still in the water. He didn't move at all when he turned around. He suddenly felt his mouth and tongue dry. There seemed to be an intense desire surging out from the depths of his throat. But Weiwei Bai's next sentence poured cold water on his head. Yi Yuxuan, I might die. Yi Yuxuan was silent for a while. Then he twisted his stiff neck. His expression tensed up. It was even colder than before. There's no such possibility. Weiwei Bai stepped into the bathtub as if nothing had happened. She sat in the water. She tilted her head. Her eyes seemed to be stained with water. You know my body? I've been sleeping. Also, my heart isn't good. I might die at any time. Crossover system. Adonis, come here. /crossover system. Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com. Download Transmigration system. Adonis, come here and read this on your phone. https://m. Sashu.com. Chapter 892. When Yi Yuxuan chose her photo, she thought that Yi Yuxuan had gotten the wrong person. After all, her illness was not suitable for the heir of a big family like him. But after she was chosen, not a single Yi family member objected. What a weirdo. Yi Yuxuan sat outside the bathtub. His arms were propped up on the edge of the bathtub. His black hair fell from his forehead and covered half of his eyes. But it didn't hurt the coldness in his eyes. He even took a towel and reached out to hold her ankle. This action was possessive and perverted. Weiwei Bai felt a little uncomfortable with the strength he used to hold her ankle. He lowered his head and carefully washed her feet with the towel. He didn't feel that this position was lowly. Then Weiwei Bai heard his steady and sure voice. I won't let you die. Weiwei Bai hesitated for a moment before saying, but my body. Yi Yuxuan raised his eyes and repeated each word in a heavy tone. I won't let anything happen to you. When you were asleep, your vital signs were very stable. Since your heart is not good, I'm already planning the surgery. I know your body better than anyone else. Weiwei Bai. She could be so stable because of the system. Otherwise, she would be a dead person now. But she couldn't say this. Bai Weiwei looked at her naked body under the water, her dazzling white body. When Yi Yuxuan discussed her health, he was actually indifferent to her body. She helplessly reached out and splashed water on his face. His handsome face was full of water stains and was unbelievably sexy. Weiwei Bai didn't seem to be bewitched. She gently held his face with her fingers and said arrogantly and coldly, Yi Yuxuan, feelings can change. Yi Yuxuan finally frowned slightly. Weiwei Bai was not afraid of his cold face. Instead, she leaned closer to him and said, I'm very beautiful, right? This was not narcissism, it was the truth. Yi Yuxuan's eyes sank as he looked at her wrist, which was as white as snow. Under her beautiful neck, her delicate collarbone was filled with water, and the water droplets fell down to the delicate and soft white place below. He breathed in the heat. Before he could look down, his chin was lifted up by Weiwei Bai. She cut off his line of sight and said with a cold smile, What if I don't wake up one day, my muscles atrophy, my skin ages, my cheeks become sunken, and I lose my hair and teeth? Can you still love me? Yi Yuxuan held her breath. He heard her say coldly, Yi Yuxuan, it's hard to love someone. It's even harder to love someone forever. I don't want you to regret it. There were no false sweet nothings, and there was no purposeful passion. She revealed her true emotions. It was so cold that it hurt. Yi Yuxuan was silent for a few seconds. Just as he was about to say something, he found that her hand had lost its support and slipped from his chin. He quickly grabbed her wrist, afraid that it would hurt her. Wei Wei Bai had already closed her eyes and fell to the side quietly. Her body was still faintly discernible under the clear water. Yi Yuxuan's face was still. He sat for a while and touched the water with his fingers. He found that it was a little cold. He stood up and pulled the towel beside him. Then, he bent down and carried her out. He carefully wrapped her in the towel and carried her out. After putting her on the bed, he suddenly bent down and kissed her gently on the lips without any desire or even sincerity. Yes, Yi Yuxuan replied softly. It was a promise that should be as important as life. Yet, he was so calm and collected. Even if she grew old, became ugly, and her body deteriorated, she would never give up. In his eyes, she could still evoke any of his emotions and make him impulsive and crazy. He could go on like this forever, as long as the soul in this body was her. /T. Chapter 893. Wei Wei Bai woke up from scolding the system. You piece of trash. Tell me, did you eat too much and become overweight? That's why you're dizzy from transmigration? She had never left early before, unless she agreed to it. However, this plane passage was like a storm. Even when she was asleep, she still felt dizzy. It was as painful as motion sickness. The system said, You fainted because I was so hungry that I couldn't carry you. That's why I staggered when I walked. Wei Wei Bai, the system was exhausted. The next time we transmigrate, I might not be able to carry your soul. I'll have to drag you. Wei Wei Bai said, Nonsense. I'm so light that I can fly. How am I heavy? The system said, You eat Yi Yuxuan's life points. You're heavy. Wei Wei Bai, she was just about to argue with the system about whether the soul was heavy or not. A scream rang out. Then, there were many screams, all from women. Wei Wei Bai looked up. The floor was covered in blood. She was so scared that she took a few steps back and almost fell. She turned around and saw a young girl lying on the floor. She was emaciated and had a ferocious look on her face. Wei Wei Bai took a deep breath. What the hell? She raised her head and looked around, only to find that she was in an incomparably luxurious hall. The dazzling crystal chandelier was obviously expensive, not to mention the dazzling jewels, antiques, and famous paintings that filled the hall. The air was filled with the nauseating smell of fresh blood. At least hundreds of young girls were running around screaming. The towering stone door was tightly shut. It was not something that could be opened by a human. Wei Wei Bai suppressed the discomfort of smelling the blood and the irritation in her heart. She immediately entered calm observation mode. She suddenly realized that something was wrong. There was danger. Without waiting for the system's reminder, she had already followed her instincts and pounced forward. The predator, leaping down from the ceiling, only managed to grab the hem of her gorgeous dress. Wei Wei Bai was wearing a pink lace tutu skirt. Her brown curly hair was messy. She fell to the ground and stabbed something in her arm. Blood immediately flowed out. The floor was littered with glass shards, and the red wine and blood were all over the floor. Ignoring the headache from the memory transfer, she saw the man who jumped down from the ceiling. He had black hair and red eyes. His face was deathly pale, like a zombie. His face was filled with a maniacal grin, and two terrifying fangs were exposed at the side of his mouth. What the hell was that? Wei Wei by then realized that in this terrifyingly large hall, other than the screaming girls, there were also some creatures that looked like men. Hunting. Memories swarmed into her mind. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. She already knew what these inhuman hunters were. Vampires. She quickly got up and ran. Behind her, the vampire laughed sinisterly and followed her unhurriedly. It seemed that he wanted to tease his prey and wait until she was in despair before he bit her to death. Wei Wei Bai grabbed the collar of her dress tightly. When she fell, the buttons flew off, revealing most of her skin. She frowned and heard the footsteps of the vampire following her. Memories of this world appeared in her mind. This was a world where vampires ruled over humans. Although humans were large in number, they were like the food pigs raised by vampires. In front of vampires who were as strong as gods, no matter if it was strength, intelligence, action, or leadership, they were all useless. Slash. Slash. Chapter 894. Blood Kindred had a strict hierarchy. A higher-level blood kindred could order a lower-level blood kindred. And in terms of hierarchy, it depended on the bloodline. The older the bloodline, the more powerful it was. For example, the noblest bloodline was inherited from the first blood kindred ancestor. Wei Wei Bai saw these messy settings and couldn't help but want to curse. What the hell was this? Don't tell her that the target of her strategy was the annoying vampire who was chasing after her. Wei Wei Bai finished looking through the memories. She also knew why she appeared at the vampire's blood feast. The blood feast, as the name suggested, was a feast for sucking blood. It was a type of entertainment that vampires liked to hold the most. They would use the name of the noble blood kindred to invite beautiful and clean virgins to this feast. And the girls that came were all here to become a blood kindred. The feast was in the name of finding the next generation of vampires, so that a large number of girls would flock here. Blood kindred could use the embrace to turn humans into blood kindred. In this world, blood kindred were the absolute upper echelons, nobles, and masters of all humans. Everyone envied blood kindred, wanting to abandon their lowly human identity and become a high and mighty blood kindred. And the original owner also came for the opportunity to receive the embrace. But she didn't expect that not long after the feast started, it would become a feast for the vampires. Those virgins were sucked dry of blood and turned into skinny corpses. Wei Wei Bai said to the system, "What kind of world is this? How can humans be so lowly? If it was me, I would overthrow these vampire bats. Humans are the head of all things." The system immediately said eagerly, "There are free flags in the supermarket that can be claimed. Why don't I give you one, and you can wave the flag that says I'm going to revolt and start a rebellion." Wei Wei Bai, scram. The vampire behind her seemed to have finally lost his patience. He suddenly sped up and said with a laugh, "Little darling, didn't you want the embrace? Why are you running? Come into my embrace. Let me kiss your neck." Bai Weiwei felt goosebumps rising on her skin. Her expression was somewhat ugly. Damn it, this was such a large-scale hunting scene. This was really a test of one's ability to survive. What's more, the system didn't tell her who her target was. However, Wei Wei Bai gave it some thought. In this situation, staying alive was the most important thing. She definitely couldn't care less about who her target was. Another young girl screamed as she collapsed. Her blood was sucked dry by the vampires. Her delicate white skin immediately caved in, turning into a withered and terrifying shape. Bai Weiwei turned her head and saw the frightening scene of the hunt. Suddenly, even the rice from the other plane was about to be thrown up. She was wearing an A-line gown similar to the ones worn by medieval noble women. The huge skirt was as gorgeous as a blooming flower. However, it was extremely inconvenient for him to move around. The fingers of the vampire behind her had already touched her shoulder. She hardened her heart and was about to call out the system to exchange for life-saving items. After all, she now had 800 HP. No matter how big or small she was, she could still squander it. He was just about to communicate with the system. The system yelled, "Run forward, the target is sitting there." Wei Wei Bai followed its words and hurriedly ran forward. Passing through the screaming crowd, a black throne appeared at the top of the hall. There was a tall person leaning on the throne. Wei Wei Bai didn't see anything clearly. She ran too fast and stepped on the edge of the skirt and fell down. Chapter 895. This feeling of loss of control caused by Wei Wei's always calm thinking to shatter. Without hesitation, she reached out and slapped him on his pale but delicate face. This action caught him off guard. Other than the young girl's scream, all the vampires stopped hunting and looked at Wei Wei Bai silently. A human actually dared to hit Prince Arthur. This made all the vampires at the scene feel a chill down their spines. They were worried that they would be killed by their prince together with this human. This slap made Arthur's body freeze. Her strength was not worth mentioning. He didn't even feel the slightest itch. He only felt that her fingers were like feathers, gently brushing the skin on his face. But this action was a form of disobedience. Even to the high-ranking vampires, this was a human's provocation to the vampires, an action that was not allowed to exist. The prince's eyes, from the confusion and greed, instantly returned to coldness. His killing intent increased his aura. After Bai Weiwei finished beating the Chinibu vampire, she suddenly woke up. Her brain was originally confused because of the excessive blood loss and the pleasure of being bitten. She immediately knew that she had made a wrong judgment. She had angered this vampire who had a favorability of -30. A bunch of thoughts flashed through Weiwei Bai's mind. The lack of information about the target made her unable to make the most correct response. She saw that Arthur's cold fingers had already reached her neck, as if he was going to break her neck bone. Between life and death, she followed her instincts and curled herself up. She stretched out her hands and hugged his cold neck tightly. Her whole body shrunk into his embrace. Her warm breath, with the sweet smell of blood, blew by his ear. "Sir, don't kill me, I beg you," she begged weakly. "I'm willing to do anything for you, anything." Delicious prey, like a sweet fruit, emitted a smell that made vampires crazy. Arthur's fingers were on her neck, and he almost broke it. But she begged for mercy in fear and took the initiative to approach him. This made him hesitate. Weiwei Bai seemed to sense his hesitation and hugged him even harder. She was like a kitten, kissing him on the cheek to please him. Her fragmented kisses continued to land on the places she had just hit. This was the first time Prince Arthur, who had lived for more than 100 years, was so close to someone. To be precise, it wasn't just people. No creature had ever been able to get so close to him and kiss him. This experience caused his body to stiffen for a few seconds. Her soft and delicious body kept trembling in his arms, as if she knew that she had made a big mistake. That was why she was willing to pay any price to please him. This kind of attachment without a bottom line made his anger from being offended dissipate a lot. He pursed his thin lips and suddenly grabbed her long hair. She was in so much pain that she couldn't help but raise her head. Arthur lowered his head and revealed his sharp teeth. He bit his wrist and then stuffed the blood into her mouth. The blood of vampires was also red. However, it was different from human blood. This kind of smell was extremely cold and domineering. Weiwei Bai really wanted to vomit, but when she remembered that this lunatic was her target, she could only grit her teeth and take the initiative to suck the blood from his wrist. She cursed in her heart at this motherfucking vampire world. However, Arthur's fingers froze. The tip of her tongue licked the skin of his wrist. It gave him a strange feeling. What a bold human. //. Chapter 896. Arthur's red eyes reflected her cute face coldly, and his murderous aura was not as strong. His voice was cold and demonic. "Since you've drunk my blood, you're mine. Stay by my side and provide me with your blood." Feeding blood to his prey. It was the most powerful way to mark a blood servant. Other than letting the prey emit his scent at all times, other vampires would not dare to touch her. What was more terrifying was that this scent made it impossible for her to escape from his tracking. If she wanted to run, he could easily find out where she was. After Arthur finished speaking, he ignored the shocked gazes of all the vampires present. He looked up casually and ordered coldly, "The blood feast is over, get out." After that, Arthur carried his prey and turned to leave. The stone door opened, and the girl who had survived the disaster. There was also a dumbfounded vampire who could only leave. The next day, the anorexic great noble, Prince Arthur, had a cute little blood servant. It spread throughout the city, and the nobles circled. While everyone was guessing the origin of the little blood servant, Yi Zichen and the others were still trying to figure out the origin of the little blood servant. Weiwei Bai, on the other hand, lost too much blood, lying in the hospital on the verge of death. She had difficulty breathing, had nightmares, and her body was so heavy that she could not move. With great difficulty, she opened her eyes with strong willpower. She saw herself lying on a soft bed, a warm ward, and a tall stone window with sunlight shining in. This was different from other planes. It was not like ancient times, nor was it like modern times in the traditional sense. Human technology was still advanced, but at the same time, the blood breed's magic existed. Her wrist was pierced with a needle for blood transfusion, and the blood in the blood bag slowly flowed into her body. Wei Bai saw that there was no one around, then said to the system fiercely, "Quick, give me that psychopath's information. How can I defeat him without information?" The system said, "The information was delayed this time. Some of it was lost." Wei Bai said, "Send it. Send as much as you can." The system immediately sent her Arthur's information. Arthur was a great noble of the blood breed, the youngest elder who controlled the most power in the blood breed world. Because he saw humans killing each other in an ugly manner as a child, he developed the idea that humans were stupid and disgusting creatures. As a result, they began to loathe humans as food. He felt that drinking human blood would dirty his noble stomach. Therefore, he began to dislike human blood. As time passed, he developed anorexia and narcolepsy. Because of his constant hunger, his personality was tough and cold, but occasionally he would be violent and cruel. She didn't lack either whimsy or coldness. Wei Bai finished reading the incomplete information. He began to analyze the character in his mind. This kind of brainless non-human should like strong and pure, little white flowers who still yearn for the light, even after suffering all kinds of torture. Seeing the ugliness of humans made them anorexic. This meant that Arthur was a lunatic who liked things that were perfect and sunny. She pondered deeply. Could it be that this time, she was going to be a retard who would smile like a Virgin Mary and say, "Forgive you," even if her blood was sucked? Needless to say, he was mentally ill and mentally retarded. They were indeed a perfect match. The system replied, Probably. Wei Bai said, "As a system, don't you feel ashamed to say uncertain words like probably?" The system immediately said proudly, "Under your influence, we have long abandoned shame. Being thick-skinned is our fine tradition." Chapter 897. Fortunately, it activated the life guarantee in time. Otherwise, the host would be committing suicide. Wei Bai only sprained her ankle under the guarantee of life guarantee. She stumbled and ran towards the forest in front. The system quickly said, "Why are you running? Don't you want a strategy?" Wei Bai said, "Nonsense, I'm talking about the strategy. This is the fun. Sitting on the bed and waiting for my blood to be sucked is a puppet. I have to move and fill out my character setting to gain favorability." The system said, "What kind of character setting do you have?" What kind of weird character setting did the host give herself again? Wei Bai said, "I'm a cute, pretty, strong, and bright little girl who looks obedient on the surface, but actually wants to escape from the evil vampire's cage. I'm kind and beautiful. I'm pure." And the system said, "Evil. Don't say anymore, I was wrong. My face is not thick enough to listen to you. Please forgive me." Wei Bai said, "What? Don't you think I'm very similar to this character setting? This is simply me acting in my own character." The system said, "Pfft." It spat out a mouthful of blood. The host's face was really thicker than the other planes. She only ate to gain face. Wei Bai ran into the forest and said to the system, "The original host didn't know Arthur. Although she came to the blood feast with the intention of becoming a vampire, she was mostly tricked into coming here. The original host studied in an aristocratic school. Because of her excellent grades, her deskmate was jealous. Her deskmate knew that the blood feast was a vampire's hunting feast, but she still gave the invitation to the original host. She tricked her into going to the feast. Yes, that invitation did not belong to the original host. After Wei Bai looked at the original host's memory, she knew that the original host was also miserable. Although she was ambitious, she was also vain. At least she did not do anything that was heartless. She was really unlucky to have met such a deskmate. She thought for a while and knew how to change her character setting. After all, she was so flattering yesterday, but today she would rather die than submit. It was a good play, and the invitation that was tricked out of him was a turning point. Didn't you want the sunshine, little white flower? She was a proper little white flower. Bai Weiwei limped forward, thinking about her character in detail, as well as the strategy, while running forward. She stumbled and fell in a sorry state. Her white nightgown was torn by the branches, and there were small bloodstains on her bare feet. Her brown curly hair fluttered behind her. She was slender and light, hidden in the gaps between the leaves. Light and shadow modeled her white body. It was like a dazzling stream of light. It slid into the eyes of the man above her head. This moment of amazement actually pierced through his heart of stone. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at -30. Weiwei Bai. Why did the favorability increase? Could it be that running away had taken effect so quickly? Arthur finally knew that she was a tenacious little white flower. So he had a good impression of her? He just thought of that. The system reminded her, the male lead is up there. Weiwei Bai looked up. Up there? A terrifying shadow loomed over her head. Weiwei Bai's eyes appeared. Huge bat wings, a black fluffy body, and a pair of terrifying red eyes. A huge and terrifying bat was above her head, staring at her coldly. Weiwei Bai, no, she refused. She refused to be the target of the bat. But when the bat saw her, it let out a terrifying sharp sound, and then directly swooped down on her. Slash. Chapter 898. Weiwei Bai. Ugly, don't come over ugly. She wanted change dimensions. She couldn't bite the bat male protagonist. Weiwei Bai was too anxious to escape. She tripped over a tree root and fell to the ground. The bat had already rushed through the forest. With an extremely handsome posture, it retracted its wings and landed heavily in front of Weiwei Bai. Weiwei Bai awkwardly retreated until she leaned against a big tree. Then, she hugged herself tightly and looked at the bat. The dust rose and fell again. A man wearing a black aristocratic costume with golden edges nimbly jumped down from the bat's back. His movements were light, as if he was flying. His long silver hair swayed and fell back on his back. Bai Weiwei reluctantly revealed an ugly smile. Darren, why are you here? Arthur slowly walked in front of her. His chin was slightly raised and his eyelids were lowered. He was cold and arrogant, as if he was looking at a lowly insect. His cold expression suddenly softened. Because of this gentleness, the originally exquisite and beautiful face, the thin and cold lips, the tall and handsome nose, and the pair of black eyes that seemed to be flowing with red light, all turned into water, bringing with it a sense of warmth. He didn't threaten her, nor did he fly into a rage. He only said indifferently in a gentle voice, "Why did you suddenly think of coming to the forest to see the scenery?" Weiwei Bai's eyes were full of vigilance. She gritted her teeth and looked at him coldly. However, she clumsily put on a flattering look. She forced a smile. "I'm not lost. This place is a bit big." Arthur observed her for a while and suppressed the sarcastic smile on his face. He said gently, "Indeed, this place is very big. The forest is full of poisonous snakes. For a human, it is very dangerous." Weiwei Bai's pupils shrank when she heard about poisonous snakes. Arthur seemed to look at her with some pity. He squatted down and still looked high and mighty. Also, outside the forest, there are all kinds of monsters and wild beasts waiting for humans who are alone. If they catch you. His fingers carelessly caressed her trembling face. It was as if he could not feel her fear at all. He smiled and said, "If you're caught, you'll be torn to pieces and eaten." When he spoke these words, his eyes turned red. It was terrifying, and the fangs by his mouth suddenly appeared. He looked incomparably beastly. Weiwei Bai's body trembled, but the fear in her eyes was suddenly replaced by clear determination. She suddenly reached out and stabbed him in the chest. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time, so his movements were fast and accurate. The silver cross in her hand was worn by the original owner. It might be an ornament, but Weiwei Bai used it as a weapon. The gentleness on Arthur's sickly pale face disappeared. His eyes turned completely red, and a violent distortion appeared in his eyes. Vampires were not afraid of sunlight, so her actions did not cause any harm to him. However, he was thoroughly enraged. A lowly human would not crawl under his feet to survive. He actually dared to run away. He was going to participate in the sacred blood conference on his mount. As a result, he sensed that his blood servant had shown a strong desire to escape. Without hesitation, he turned around and gave chase. It was rare for him to find a human whose blood could enter his mouth. Moreover, in these few months, the Sacred Blood Conference would decide who the next leader of the vampires would be. Their 13 elders were all eyeing this position covetously. Therefore, he needed this human's blood to replenish his strength. When he chased after her, he even wondered if he had sensed wrongly. Chapter 899. Wei Wei Bai felt that there was something wrong with the image of a little white flower. Perhaps she should have adopted the image of a tyrant flower. When she was stepped on by Arthur to eat dirt, she finally fainted. When she woke up again, she heard people talking. So this is the blood servant. I heard that Prince Arthur rejected the Holy Blood Conference just to capture her. She doesn't look like anything special. Is it the smell of her blood? The blood that the prince likes must be more delicious. The escaping blood servant needs to be punished. When she wakes up, if the prince doesn't protect her, then start punishing her, A bunch of women's voices rang out. They buzzed like thousands of flies. Wei Wei Bai was annoyed. She had to conquer and deal with perverts at the same time. Her body was still losing too much blood. Couldn't she just have a good sleep? She had always had a low tolerance for targets that were not part of her strategy. Wei Wei Bai suddenly opened her eyes and saw that she was lying on a huge bed. There were hazy gauze curtains hanging around her. She tore open the curtains and saw a bunch of women wearing Rococo-style dresses laughing and talking. What the hell is this? The system said, "You're maid." By Wei Wei. Fuck, I actually have a maid, this thing. The system said, because you're the prince's blood servant, there will be human noble women serving you as your maids. Wei Wei Bai said, they don't come with good intentions. These women did not look like they were here to serve her. They looked more like they were here to trip her up. She looked pale and cute as she poked her head out from behind the gauze curtains. The women looked over and were stunned, because Bai Wei Wei was too cute and fair, and her eyes were also very special round-shaped cat eyes. For a moment, none of the women said anything. Wei Wei Bai frowned. Who are you? As soon as she spoke, the women knelt down and saluted her. Their attitude was a little careless. Miss, we're here to serve you. Wei Wei Bai looked at them warily. Her fingers gripped the gauze curtain tightly. She seemed very nervous. The disdain in the eyes of those human maids increased. One of the maids walked over. Because you ran away, you need to be punished before His Majesty the Prince forgives you. Wei Wei Bai sneered. Why should I accept punishment? What kind of thing is a blood servant? I don't admit to it at all. What you're doing is imprisoning, kidnapping, and torturing. According to the law, you should be imprisoned and sentenced. As soon as this sentence came out, the women at the scene were silent for a moment, and then they laughed together. To think that there are still humans who can say such things. How laughable. As the blood servant of a noble prince, you should be proud. Being a blood servant is such a glorious thing. Your parents will be happy for you. You really don't know what's good for you. There must be something wrong with your head. You should start receiving your punishment. Wei Wei Bai, on the other hand, had a cold expression on her face. Her face was extremely tense as she asked doubtfully, Aren't you humans? How can you be so willing to be oppressed by vampires and still be proud of it? These were even more outrageous words. This world was controlled by vampires. One of the human maids finally couldn't take it anymore. She rushed over and pulled the weak Wei Wei Bai off the bed. She was high above, fanning herself as she coldly looked at her. What are you thinking in that head of yours? How can a lowly human like us insult a noble blood clan? Chapter 900. Wei Wei Bai was speechless. Although her character was a strong and unyielding little cutie who would never admit defeat. Every word he said was pretentious and courting death. But these people in front of her were probably humans. Why did she feel that the humans in this world had been thoroughly brainwashed by vampires? She couldn't help but ask the system, "Can we change the main mission? I feel that something as trivial as conquering a vampire's love is nothing compared to the great cause of human liberation." Humans have been brainwashed to such an extent. As a human, she really wanted to sigh. The system said, "Sigh, why do you always want to die like this? Isn't it good to admit that vampires are noble and beautiful, and that you lowly humans are not worthy of them?" Wei Wei Bai was shocked. "Are you possessed by vampires?" The system said, "No, it's just that I suddenly saw a side mission and couldn't bear to give it to you." Wei Wei Bai said, "Side mission? How crazy can it be? I'm used to it. Don't underestimate my tolerance." The system said, "Just a reminder, this side mission was suggested by you to the main system." It finished speaking. The system beep sounded, followed by an impassioned background music. It was the kind of music that could automatically elevate one's level and kill the enemy with a broadsword. In the background music, the system's calm, automatic beep sounded excited. Humans will never be slaves. The host is willing to use her own flesh and blood to fight against the dirty vampire army. It's inspiring. Wei Wei Bai, I feel like I'm going to die. I feel like the side mission is definitely, fuck it. Please complete the mission of resisting vampires and destroying the vampiric empire with all your might. Ding, the resisting vampires side mission has been activated. Go, young girl, your glorious road of blood has been opened. Humans are noble. Vampires will one day be a dish on our table. This mission had just been issued. A red blood bar appeared above Wei Wei Bai's head. Side mission failed. Spin 100 times on the spot and self-destruct along with the system. Wei Wei Bai, what kind of punishment was self-destructing on the spot? Was this a punishment for her cheap mouth? Wei Wei Bai, system, I was wrong. Vampires, no. The noble blood clan is the leader of all things. They're the strongest in the universe. Humans are chinibu and weak. They deserve to be inferior. Hurry up and tell the main system that I'm afraid of death and can't take on the task of being humanity's savior. She couldn't bear this task. How could a weak and pitiful girl like her bear such a heavy task? The system said, "Don't talk to me, I'll go quietly. 6 months later, we'll definitely self-destruct together. So let me go and have some fun." Wei Wei Bai said, "This mission is too big and too unreasonable. How am I supposed to fight against the entire vampiric empire by myself? Are you trying to kill me?" The system said, "Actually, you don't have to succeed. You just have to hold on until your HP bar turns green." Wei Wei Bai, "Turn green," the system replied. "It means that if you keep resisting and causing the vampires to suffer losses, your health bar will turn green. Once you've caused enough damage to the vampires, your health bar will turn completely green." After all, Wei Wei Bai was a host who didn't have many cheats. To fight against the entire vampiric empire, the main system wouldn't go to that extent. After Wei Wei Bai heard this, she was in a daze and thought for a while. It really didn't seem that difficult, as if this was a strategy that couldn't let her have a comfortable time, so she had to go to hell mode to die. Wei Wei Bai's face paled. The maids thought that they had scared her, so they couldn't help but laugh and say, "Miss, get up. Your punishment time is up." Download the at https://m Sashu. Com button at the bottom to record this chapter. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.